she was his fantasy come to life. It took her quite a while, but he continued to control himself, even as Susan began to moan and to squeeze him with her thighs, rocking with more urgency and starting to shudder deep within, her breath coming in staggered little girlish gasps. Finally, she sighed and rolled off, laid her head on the pillow and smiled at him. "You feel really, really good," she said happily. "I'm sorry that took so long." "You can do that forever if you like," he said softly. "I know it can't be easy with someone you're not attracted to." "It wasn't that," she said, touching his face. "I wasn't imagining you were someone else or anything. It's just that this was the first time I've been with anyone since—" "I understand," he said, feeling warmth spreading over him. "So is it my turn?" "Yep. You've earned it." He moved between her thighs and she smiled up at him as he entered her. "You can forget the coitus interruptus," she said bashfully. "But what about a baby?" "Marty, we're not even going to be alive 9 months from now. And it wouldn't keep me from getting pregnant anyway. We might as well enjoy this." He began moving slowly, but after a couple of minutes he couldn't help gasping and touching her face. "Please, Susan," he finally said. "Can I kiss you just once?" She took his shoulders and pulled him down to her, kissing him lustfully and causing him to explode inside. She gasped as the startling sensation triggered a second climax, which was so unexpected that she laughed aloud and wrapped herself tightly around him as he groaned like a man put to the rack. "Marty, that was amazing," she said after he collapsed beside her, his chest heaving. "Is there always so much of it? My God! You were in the wrong business." She cackled with delight at her own joke, almost giddy from the release. He was still catching his breath. "Oh, sweet Christ, Susan, I love you so fucking much." She felt between her legs with her fingers and brought them away, looking at them. "Damn," she said in awe. "I'm amazed." He kissed her breast. "Thank you. We're gonna have to do this again, honey." "Honey?" he said in disbelief. "Do you mean that?" "You know," she said with a melancholy smile, "it may have taken the end of the world, but I think you may have finally won me over, Marty. This was really something unexpected." The smile that came to him was so big that he thought his face might crack. "Was it my gunplay out on the highway?" "No," she chuckled. "I'm pretty sure it was your gunplay right here in bed." "You've got no idea how much I love you, Susan." She held up her fingers and giggled. "Actually, I've got a pretty good idea." Neither of them noticed a tall man in a dark suit stride into the bedroom holding a pistol, until he spoke aloud. "That was quite a show. What the fuck are you doing here?" Marty bolted upright. "Get the fuck out of my house!" Agent Paulus laughed. "It's not your house anymore, asshole. It's been mine for days. And I'd like to thank you for stocking my basement with food." Marty knew he was a dead man, that he'd never be able to protect Susan now. "You've been living down there?" he said, aghast. "Get out of my bed," Paulus said, gesturing with the weapon. "The little lady and I don't want your blood all over the mattress." Without warning, 3 loud cracks rang out. Hit in the chest, Paulus stumbled backward into the wall and slid to the floor. Quickly, Susan pulled the pistol from beneath the sheet and tried to shoot him again, but the Walther jammed just like it had for Marty earlier that day. Paulus made an odd strangled sound and struggled to lift his weapon, but Marty sprang from the bed and threw the lamp at him, then rushed at Paulus and kicked him in the chin with his bare foot. Paulus slumped over and continued to make the grotesque gurgling sound for almost a minute before falling silent. He still wasn't quite dead, but Marty didn't waste any more time. He wrapped the agent in a sheet and dragged him from the room, down the tiled hallway and out the back door, where he stashed the dying man under his deck. When he returned to the room, Susan was still sitting in bed, staring in disbelief at the jammed Walther in her hand, with the empty shell casing stovepiped in the receiver. She looked up at him disgustedly. "I don't believe it." "Believe what, honey?" Those guys at the gun store sold me a piece of shit. Chapter 23. Private Shannon Emery ran around to the other side of her overturned Humvee and dragged Sergeant Flynn out through the window. The 4 female troopers in back were either dead or so close to death that it didn't matter, doomed the minute the rear window of the vehicle had been struck by a 66mm LAW rocket fired by their male counterparts from within the company. The 6 women crammed into the lead Humvee had stopped to come back in support, the roof gunner firing the 50 cal machine gun. Orange tracers streaked through the darkness as the heavy half-inch rounds easily pierced the hulls of the lighter armored Humvees driven by the men. The female gunner killed the driver of the closest vehicle, setting it on fire and forcing the other 2 pursuing Humvees to retreat back down the highway. "How bad are you, Sarge?" Emery said, collecting their carbines from inside the Hummer. The machine gunner opened up again with a long burst, spotting 3 survivors from the burning Humvee as they advanced up the median. Their bodies virtually exploded from the hydrostatic shock of the 50 cal rounds. "Shannon, let's go!" the gunner screamed. "Before they bring up the javelin." "Can you walk?" Emery said to the sergeant. He held onto her shoulder, putting 1 foot forward. "I'm okay." They packed themselves into the armored Humvee with the remaining 6 female troops, and the driver sped off down the highway. "Take the first exit," Sergeant Flynn said. "We can't outrun them. We'll have to lose them." He smacked the gunner on her leg, and she ducked down inside to see what he wanted. "Be careful with that barrel. It only takes a 4-second burst to warp it." "Hoo-ah!" the gunner said, and stood back up to cover the rear. The driver raced along in the night at 50 miles per hour in the fast lane, where there seemed to be fewer cars out of gas. 2 travelers tried to flag her down by stepping right out in front of her, and got themselves run over for their efforts. "What the hell was that, Cherie?" someone asked from the back. "Motherfuckers in the road, girl!" Cherie was weaving in and out of the stopped cars, trying to keep her speed up. "I guess Lieutenant Boyle didn't like us taking the only 2 armored Humvees," Flynn said. "Fuck them," Cherie said. "We know what they was planning." She slowed down as she pulled off the highway and drove up the exit ramp. "Which way we going, Sarge?" "South. That's all I know to do." "Contact!" the gunner screamed from above, and the 50 cal began to hammer away once again. The others craned their necks to see out the thick back window, but all they could see were the tracers streaking off to the rear and to the left. Suddenly, a brilliant fireball behind them illuminated the countryside, revealing half a dozen civilian silhouettes near the road with hunting rifles and shotguns. "Roadblock!" Cherie shouted, hitting the brakes and cutting the wheel to skirt a number of cars parked across the road. The gunner collapsed and fell down inside on top of them, a bullet through her head. "God damn it!" Emery swore, feeling the dead gunner's brain oozing into her hands. "She's gone, guys." Sergeant Flynn took a helmet from one of the women and stood up to man the gun. "This mission sure went to shit in a hurry." Emery opened the back door and allowed the woman's body to fall out as they sped along. "Sorry, Carmen. We'll see you soon." From the turret above, Flynn scanned the countryside through a night vision device attached to the front of his helmet. There wasn't much to see except empty terrain. 30 miles later, they came across an abandoned silver mine, and Cherie pulled off the road and drove up the hill, shining the lights on the gate. There were close to 20 motorcycles parked outside the entrance to the mine. "Shit, I know who that is," Emery said. "Get us out of here, Cherie." There was a rifle shot, and Sergeant Flynn fell down into the Humvee, hit in the neck. Blood was spurting from his carotid artery, and Emery clamped her hand over the wound as Cherie jammed the vehicle into reverse. The other women in the Humvee shouted an instant before they were rammed in the front right by a black Dodge van. The steering wheel spun wildly in Cherie's hands as the vehicle whipped around, catching her thumb with the crossbar and snapping her wrist. "Dismount!" shouted a soldier in the passenger seat, deciding their only chance now was to fight it out. "Don't!" Emery warned, but it was too late. The others were already piling out on either side of the vehicle. She covered Flynn's body with her own as the bullets began to fly. The staccato sound of their M4s met with a fusillade of shotgun blasts at close range. Her comrades screamed as they fell, and moments later there was no sound except for the idling engine. As Sergeant Flynn died under her, Emery grabbed for her weapon, but someone caught her ankle and jerked her out the back door. She landed hard on her chin and saw stars as she rolled to her back, trying to kick away the hairy blonde man dragging her across the gravel toward the entrance to the mine. A biker chick swore at her viciously and kicked her in the side of the head, and the lights went out. Chapter 24. Sealing blast door number 1, Forrest announced over the radio, pushing the door shut, pulling the lever hard to seal it tight, and turning the bright red wheel to extend the 16 3-inch steel pins around the entire jam. Door 1 sealed. Roger that, Ulrich answered from launch control, watching him on the monitor. Forrest then withdrew 20 feet to the second blast door, holding the barrel of his slung carbine with his hand to prevent it from scraping against the wall. He stepped into the stairwell and allowed Kane to push the door closed and seal it. We're 100%, Forrest announced. How do we look above? No contacts. Everything's nominal. Welcome home, gentlemen, and congratulations. Phase 1 is finally complete. Hooah! Came the unanimous reply. Forrest and Kane made their way to launch control, where they stashed the carbines in a locked steel cabinet, hopefully never to need them again. Each man had a key to the cabinet, which he would wear on a chain with his dog tags 24 hours a day for the next 2 years. I imagine the ladies are all glued to the televisions, Forrest said. Ulrich confirmed this. There was a TV in launch control too, but the volume was down. Forrest and the others had seen so much violence in their days overseas that watching it on television held no special appeal for them. They were interested in updates, but the endless repetition only annoyed them. Well, that should hold their attention for a while, Forrest said. How long do you think before the power grid begins to fail? So far they seem to be keeping the fire stoked up there, Ulrich said. There haven't been any blackouts reported yet, which I find remarkable. But after tomorrow's impact, I expect the entire grid to fail in a cascade effect all the way to the eastern seaboard. There's no way it's going to be able to sustain itself after such a large part of it is blasted out of existence. I hope the above-ground cameras survive, Vasquez said. I don't like the idea of being blind down here. After the fires go out, we can go up and replace them, Danzig said. I'm not too keen on that idea either. What if that nuclear blast of theirs radiated the whole damn asteroid? That's what the NBC suits are for, Forrest said. What time do you plan to lower the antenna array, Wayne? Just before sunrise. I'd like to leave it up right to the end, but in case the damn thing jams again, I want to leave some time for us to go up and fix it. That's what we'll do then. Forrest checked his watch against the clock on the console. 05:05 hours. Almost exactly 4 hours to go. Are the kids asleep? The women put them to bed in the cafeteria for tonight, Danzig said. Dr. West came into launch control and gave them each a time-released Benzedrine capsule. Forrest wanted them all as alert as possible, and after a day and a night of drinking, amphetamines were the only solution. They had all used amphetamines numerous times during special operations overseas, and were aware of the sleep debt they were accumulating. But there would be plenty of time to repay that debt in the coming days. For now, they were on a war footing and needed to remain sharp. Doc, talk to you a minute? Forrest said, beckoning him into the blast tunnel. West followed him in and pulled the door closed. Is there anything going on with Lynette I should know about? Forrest asked. Has Price said anything to you? West frowned. I think Price is worried she may not handle this very well. I've already talked to Mike about her. I told him I'm more than willing to let him treat any mental health issues that arise. Hey, are you? Well, you and Veronica seem nothing's going on. Why, are people talking already? West smiled. This place is wall to wall with women. What do you think? Forrest laughed sardonically. And this looked so easy on paper. Who I'm worried about is Oscar, West said. When his insulin finally runs out, he's done for. You know that, right? Yeah, I do, Forrest said heavily. He had been there when Vasquez was shot during a mission in Afghanistan, losing part of his pancreas. One day at a time, Doc. Forrest patted him on the shoulder and made his way to the common chamber where the rest of the adults were watching 2 different news channels on 2 different televisions. All were absorbed, and a few looked downright frightened. Joanne was holding Renee's hand. At the age of 23, she was the youngest mother in the group, and she looked petrified. Lynette was the oldest woman at 38, and she appeared on the verge of tears as well. Forrest caught her attention and gestured for her to join him. Is something wrong? She asked, expecting to be in trouble for something. Hey, Lynette, would you keep an eye on Michelle for me? She looks terrified. Me? She asked in surprise. You'd rather not? No, I mean, sure, I'd go over and sit with her myself, he went on. But I'm going to be moving all around the installation during the hour building up to the impact. No, she said, suddenly finding confidence. I don't mind at all. Thanks, he said. She's one of the younger mothers, and you wives have all known each other so long. No, I understand. It's no trouble. Thanks, Jack. Price winked at Forrest from across the room as Lynette went to Michelle. Forrest smiled back and slipped into the cafeteria for a peek at the children, all nestled in their sleeping bags in orderly rows on the floor. Laddie stood up from the floor, where he'd been keeping guard among them. You're fine, he said quietly, and the dog settled himself back in. Melissa was in the cafeteria as well, but she wasn't asleep. She sat at one of the tables reading a book. He sat down and offered her a stick of gum. Thanks, she said. How much longer now? About 4 hours. Do you think there will be earthquakes? There sure could be, he said. Some of them might even be pretty big. But they won't hurt the silo. We might jiggle around in here, but this installation is resting on giant steel springs. What if the asteroid hits nearby, though? Well, either everything's going to be just fine, or we won't know what hit us. But what if we're right on the edge of the crater, or whatever? He couldn't help chuckling. Then this place will probably crack in half, and we'll be looking out that wall over there at the biggest hole in the ground any of us has ever seen. She smiled. I'll bet you were a good dad. And just like that, his eyes flooded with tears. That's a nice thing for you to say, he said thickly. I don't know if I was or not. You were. Taylor said so. Okay, he said, blinking the tears away. How about we stick to earthquakes? She looked over at Laddie and patted her leg. The dog jumped up and immediately came over to her. Do you think maybe you could be my stepdad? Forrest was so overcome that he excused himself. He went straight to the lavatory and splashed water on his face at the sink, drawing a deep breath as he looked at himself in the mirror. Well, you're a fine figure of leadership. When he stepped out, Melissa was there waiting, a worried look on her face. Come here, he said, giving her a hug. Don't worry, it caught me off guard. I'd be happy to. She hugged him tighter. I asked Uncle Michael if he minded, and he said no. Well, I'll have to be sure to thank old Uncle Mike, he said quietly. You're not mad at him, are you? She asked, looking up at him. I asked him not to say anything until I was sure I wanted to ask you. No, he said. I'm very flattered. Thank you for asking. But you've only known me a couple of weeks. You may change your mind later. She stood back and shook her head with a smile. I know I'm a kid, but kids know a good dad when they see one. He choked up again. You're going to have to stop that, he said softly. She stepped forward and lifted herself up onto her toes, giving him a kiss on the cheek. Thank you. On his way back to launch control, Forrest passed Michael in the corridor. Thanks for the heads up, fucker. Michael stopped and turned. You didn't tell her no, did you? Yeah, douchebag. he said without looking back. I told her no. Michael chuckled and stood watching as Forrest turned the corner. Sorry, Jack, but you brought this on yourself. Chapter 25. When the asteroid struck the Earth's atmosphere, it was traveling at nearly 100,000 miles an hour and burning at nearly 1 million degrees Fahrenheit. Jack's wife and the horse ranch were vaporized before they were ever aware of its arrival. It struck near the Montana-Canada border, with a force 3/4 of a million times more powerful than the Soviet Emperor bomb, the most powerful man-made bomb ever detonated. It blasted a crater nearly a mile deep and 50 miles wide in the Earth's crust, hurling millions of tons of dust and rock into the atmosphere, and sending out a blast wave hot enough to kill every living creature above ground for 600 miles. Winds traveling at thousands of miles an hour flattened trees and buildings for at least half that distance, pulverizing them. A massive heat wave spread out from there, setting fire to large swaths of land within a radius of 1,500 miles, all of which took place in seconds. Within the next few seconds, massive earthquakes emanated from the epicenter for 1,000 miles, triggering lesser quakes all across North America and down into Mexico. Massive cracks appeared in the Earth's crust over Yellowstone National Park, and the geysers there shot giant plumes of boiling water, hundreds of feet into the air even as the park was devoured in flames. Rivers shifted and changed direction. Giant landslides occurred all across the northern Rockies, and a dark cloud of smoke and dust began to envelop the continent, fed by the ash borne up from flame-driven winds. The continental power grid began to fail immediately, and a massive blackout spread across both the United States and Canada in all directions, killing the power to every city within minutes after impact. Cities at the outer edges of the blast zone were set ablaze, and rescue workers were hard-pressed to even breathe in the heat, much less fight the fires. 300 million Americans and Canadians were dead within 60 seconds of the asteroid hitting the atmosphere, at least half of whom had been obliterated by the initial blast. Tremors were felt the world over within the first half an hour. And though the asteroid did not strike the sea, tsunamis occurred as fault lines along the ocean floor shifted and distorted the water depths to send 20-foot waves across the ocean's surface, swamping the coasts of Europe, Africa, and Asia within the first few hours. Horrifying satellite images were beamed down all across Europe, the Middle East, Asia, Australia, and South America, as the ring of destruction spread across North America, and the continent was blotted out over the first couple of hours. Everyone watching now understood with absolute certainty that the shroud of darkness would soon blanket the world. Theirs would be a less cataclysmic end, a slow and methodical procession of starvation and disease, a horrific return to the Dark Ages on a global scale. The long winter had not quite begun, but it was coming. Chapter 26. Marty and Susan were in the basement making love, wrapped in one another's arms at the moment of impact. But they felt a sudden tremor in the concrete floor, vibrating as if an 18-wheeler had been dropped in the street right in front of the house from 20 stories. "Sweet Jesus," Susan said, sitting up. "We're still here," Marty said. "Holy shit, we're still here!" He scooted across the mattress to turn on the television, but there was only static, and a few seconds later the power went out. "That's it, Marty. We're dead in the water." The wind began to pick up outside the house, and soon it sounded as though a storm had blown in. When they heard a cannonade of massive thunderclaps, they quickly dressed and went upstairs to see a raging dust storm outside the kitchen window. In the living room, they peeked through the curtains, and the houses across the street were completely obscured, the wind now howling like a freight train. They watched in fascination as the dust continued to blow past the house, all sorts of debris soaring by. "We'd better be careful of the windows," he warned. "How long will it blow like that?" He laughed. "I've got no idea," he said, lifting his arms and letting them fall. "Think of it, Sue. This is what killed the dinosaurs." "I am thinking of it, Marty. It's why I'm ready to shit a brick." He put his arms around her. "Don't worry. I am too." A softball-sized meteor struck the roof and shattered the clay tiles. What was that? He looked back outside and saw stone-sized meteors striking down all across the neighborhood. Oh shit! The ejecta's coming down. Let's get back to the basement. After half an hour, the worst of the meteor shower seemed to have passed, and the winds at last began to abate. But the dust in the air took hours to settle, and by then the sun had begun to vanish behind the veil of smoke and dust in the upper atmosphere. They went back upstairs and watched as the neighborhood was slowly revealed, everything coated in fine brown dust. I don't suppose there's any point in going outside, she said. We'd only leave footprints to show that we're in here. So what now? He stood looking at her. This is it, honey. I'm sorry. Damn. She sat on the couch and peered through a gap in the curtains. I thought I was ready for this, but I'm not. He sat down and took her hand. How could anybody be? Look at you. You're calm as a cucumber. I'm only being calm for you. Inside, I'm shitting bricks too, believe me. She touched his face and tears formed in her eyes. I don't really deserve you. He shook his head. Not true. That's my decision. But she sat looking at her hand in his. You deserve to be with someone who loved you. Who loved you before this. Hey, if you love me now even a little bit, I'm a happy guy. I do, she said with a smile. Then she took his hand in both of hers. I want to tell you something. And then I don't want to talk about it ever again, okay? He nodded. It's up to you, she told him. It's up to you when we quit. Susan, it's too soon to be... Shh. Sometime between now and when the food runs out. Before it runs out, Marty. Because I don't want to see it coming. I want you to take care of it. That means from this moment on, whenever you decide is fine. I just don't want to know when it's coming. I know that's a lot to ask because I know how much you love me, but I'm asking you to promise me. His eyes started to water. Susan, I can't promise that. Not like that. You have to, she insisted. Because all I want to do from here on is eat, sleep, and make love. That's it. And I won't be able to enjoy our time together unless I know you're going to take care of it when the time comes. Promise me, Marty, please. If you love me like you say you do, promise me. Okay, he said reluctantly, knowing that it would be an extremely difficult promise for him to keep, and that he might well end up reneging when the time came. Thank you, she said, and she kissed him. You don't know how much better that makes me feel. He was tempted to say that he knew exactly how much better it made her feel, because he now felt that much worse. But it was his responsibility to take care of her, and her peace of mind was every bit as important to him as her physical safety. So, what do you want to do? Let's watch outside for a little while and then go finish making love. I wonder how long before anyone else will come out. They're probably all thinking like we are, she said. Party time is definitely over. Hey, speak of the devil, he said, pointing. A few young men were coming out of the house across the street and getting into a van. They were toting shotguns and carrying packs over their shoulders. Do you know them? It's the Gilberts, he said. They're cousins. Normally pretty nice guys, but it's a different world now. Where do you think they're going? He shrugged. I'm curious as hell, but I'm not going to ask. I wish we could. Normally I'm pretty withdrawn, but right now I feel like being around people. How about a shot of tequila instead? She smiled then. That's what I like about you. She got up from the couch and began to unbutton the shirt he had given her. You're always thinking. Chapter 27. Ulrich sat at the console in launch control with Aaron in his lap, counting down the time to impact. Taylor and Dr. West sat beside them in the light of an electric lamp. They had shut down all the generators and disconnected all of the main batteries against the possibility of damage to the silo. wanting to mitigate any chance of fire. T-minus 60 seconds, Ulrich said into the intercom. Erin hid her face in his neck and he rubbed her back. We'll be okay, baby. I'm fucking terrified, she whispered. I'm so glad we never had kids, Wayne. Shh, he said softly. In the common chamber, Forrest stood against the wall with his hands clasped in front of him, smiling calmly in the lamplight as the women sat in the center of the room holding their children. Melissa sat against the wall near Forrest, with Laddie between them, and Veronica sat across the room with her back against Michael's chest. Forrest was mindful not to make eye contact. He did notice that Andy was looking in his direction more than any of the others, so he gave her a wink that brought a smile to her otherwise frightened visage. Lynette was sitting with her husband Price on the floor beside Michelle, as he had asked her to. Kane was sitting behind Tanya, who sat holding Stephen in her lap. It was the first time Forrest had noticed them showing any affection. Vasquez and Danzig sat beside them with their wives and children. Forrest's original plan had been to let the children sleep through the impact, but the mothers vetoed that idea unanimously, wanting their children in their arms at the moment everyone they knew and loved was blasted out of existence. I've made a mistake, Karen said in a sudden panic. I should be with my sister where I belong. She pulled her daughter close and began to weep. Veronica felt Michael tense up and felt that her suspicions were confirmed. Forrest continued to smile calmly, very pleased with how they were all doing so far, Karen's little outburst having been the least of what he was prepared to deal with. Okay, kids, he said happily. Everyone get ready to hold your noses like we practiced earlier. All of the children and their mothers held their noses. Now when I say, everyone pinch your nose and blow gently until your ears pop. Dr. West had suggested this as a precaution against a sudden increase in air pressure within the silo, which no one expected. But then again, no one had ever experienced a 6-teraton explosion before. T-minus 30 seconds, Ulrich said. All of the mothers told their children how much they loved them. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Everyone blow, Forrest said gently. 2, 1. Impact. A few seconds later, the earth shuddered deep within, and all around it, groaning as if stricken a mortal wound. There was no change in air pressure, and no sense that the silo was being squeezed or in danger of implosion. Almost everyone held their breath, waiting. Sounds like it hit pretty far away, Kane said, looking up at the ceiling. Forrest winked at him and held up his 1-second finger. Then, as if on cue, the entire complex shook violently as the shock wave passed through the Earth's crust. Forrest pressed hard against the wall, bracing his feet against the floor as the room jiggled back, forth, and up and down on its shocking phase. The women and the children screamed in terror, all of them covering their heads, but nothing fell and no cracks appeared in the walls. The entire installation having been purposefully built to absorb this very kind of shockwave. Within a few seconds, the Earth stopped shaking, and everything grew silent. Well, they apparently knew what they were doing when they built this place, Forrest said. Is it over? Joanne asked, lifting her head. Lynette and Michelle were crying in one another's arms, and a few of the children were crying as well, but everyone else was reasonably well composed, considering the circumstances. Expect aftershocks, Forrest replied. But I think we've felt the worst of it. He looked down to see Melissa looking up at him, her arm around Laddie's shoulders. The dog seemed more curious than disquieted. You okay? No crater? She said with a smile. That should be about 1,000 miles north of here. He tweaked her nose and went about checking to make sure everyone else was all right, asking if anyone felt like they were going to be sick. When everyone said they were okay, he asked one of the men to go below and reconnect the batteries. Then he stepped into launch control. What do you think, Wayne? Erin stood and took Taylor by the hand. We'll go sit with the others now. The women kissed their husbands and left the room. We should be feeling an earthquake any time, Ulrich said. 10 minutes later, they felt their first real tremor, but it was nothing compared with the shockwave. "Switch on the cameras," Forrest said. "See if we're blind." Ulrich turned on the monitor, and they were all surprised to see that the house wasn't yet in flames. When he switched to the outside feeds, however, it was an altogether different scene. The grasslands all around the house were burning. "Good thing we mowed back all that grass," Ulrich said. "We may get to keep the house." "Is it raining fire?" West asked. "Sure as hell is," Forrest said. "The asteroid blasted millions of tons of rock into the outer atmosphere." "Then we'll be lucky to keep the house," Ulrich said, drumming his fingers. "The house was always a bonus," Forrest said. "So were the cameras." Taylor came back into the room and said to her husband, "Honey, Lynette's hyperventilating. Price and Michael have taken her to medical." West looked at Forrest and smiled. "And so it begins." Forrest patted him on the shoulder as he passed. "Take good care of her, Doc. She's the life of the party." "Shame on you, Jack Forrest," Taylor said. Forrest followed them out on his way to check the missile silos for damage. He went to the end of blast tunnel number 1 and slowly cracked the blast door, shining a flashlight into the chasm before stepping in. When he turned on the lights, everything seemed to be in order, but he walked every level to make sure, seeing that a few boxes of food had fallen over but nothing more. As he was about to leave the silo, the door opened and Veronica stepped onto the deck, pushing the door closed behind her but not sealing it. "Is something wrong?" he asked. She stepped into him and began to kiss him. Forrest allowed himself to be backed up against a stack of boxes and sank his fingers into her hair, opening his mouth to let their tongues intertwine as they sucked hungrily at one another. He turned her around and pressed her up against the boxes, giving her one last long kiss and backing away. "Okay," he said, breathing deep and straightening his shirt. "Now that we've both gotten that out of our systems." "You didn't look at me once the entire time. What did you want me to do, shout, 'Baby, I love you'?" She looked at him and put her hands on her hips. "What are we going to do?" "What are you talking about?" "About us." "What us?" "Jack, you're not funny." "Hey, you know what?" he said. "The fucking world hasn't even been dead half an hour. Let's see if we can get through the first 24 before we start acting like we've lost our goddamn minds." "I need to know if you want me." "We're not having this conversation right now." "Why not?" "Because my wife was just killed by a fucking meteor. How's that for starters?" "Oh, Christ," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, Jack. You're right, I didn't even..." She covered her mouth. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Ah, shit." He jacked one leg back against the wall and fired up a cigarette. "This mission already isn't going according to plan." "I disagree," she said quietly. "But you're right. We should wait and talk about this later. I'm sorry I've made you angry." "You haven't made me angry, Veronica. I'm hopped up on benzodrine." "I didn't know that." "We all are, in case there's an emergency." He took a long drag from the cigarette. "And what do you mean you disagree? You can't tell me we just acted normally." "This is by no means a normal social dynamic. The world just ended. I think we're entitled to let our inhibitions drop for a minute." "You are, but I'm not," he replied. "What's Michael going to think about you being gone?" "Honestly, he's probably talking to Karen." "Oh, okay. So that's what sent you chasing after..." "I didn't chase you anyplace, Jack. You chased me, remember?" Forrest took another drag and smiled. "Yes, I do." "So what happens if I choose wrong?" she wanted to know. "Suppose Michael decides he loves Karen a few weeks from now, which will be my fault, admittedly. Andy is hot on your butt. I could end up alone in this brave new world of ours." "Take the time to figure out what you want," he said. "Either way, you're not going to end up alone, I promise." "You promise?" "I don't break promises and I don't repeat them." "I'm going to hold you to it," she said, pointing a finger at him before opening the door and slipping back out. Forrest found an excuse to spend another couple of minutes in the missile silo, then went back to launch control, where he found Ulrich smirking in front of the console, watching the grass fires above. "What the fuck are you smirking at?" "She didn't seal either door," Ulrich replied. "That tunnel's like a megaphone." "I'll have to remember that," Forrest said, checking one of the many charts on the wall behind Ulrich to see if the toilet paper count matched the one he'd just taken. "We should probably go ahead and rig some sort of a bidet, or at least have a plan drawn up for one. There's no way all these women and children are going to conserve enough toilet paper." Ulrich laughed quietly to himself. "What's so fucking funny, Snickers?" Ulrich chuckled again, saying in an overly manly voice, "I don't break my promises, little lady, and I don't repeat them either." Then he broke himself up laughing, slapping his hand on the counter. "Fucking priceless!" Forrest stood looking at the back of Wayne's head, chewing his cheek. "Break yourself up, don't you, Stumpy?" Ulrich continued to laugh. "Oh man, wait till Aaron hears that one." Forrest put his finger in his mouth and got it good and wet before sticking it into Ulrich's ear. "You motherfucker!" Ulrich said, grabbing the side of his head and springing from the chair, wiping fruitlessly at the offended ear. "You fucking cocksucker!" Kinda felt like a monkey's dick, didn't it? Ulrich used the tail of his shirt to dry the inside of his ear, chuckling some more. "I'm still telling Aaron." "She'd better keep her mouth shut about it too," Forrest warned, "or I'll stick my finger someplace else." Ulrich stood tucking his shirt back in, assuming a more serious expression. "You know how goddamn sorry I am about Monica, right?" Forrest nodded. "She's not hurting anymore, Wayne. And who knows? Maybe they're really together again. What a party we'll all have one day, huh? All of us back together?" "That would be quite a party," Forrest agreed, heading for the other door. "I'm going down to check number 2 silo. Try not to stir up any more shit while I'm gone." "Hey, Jack?" Forrest paused. "I promise, man." "Fuck you." Later, Forrest returned to launch control to find Kane and Ulrich listening to the shortwave radio. "Getting anything?" "Plenty," Kane said. "You should hear some of this." Andy came into the room and Ulrich quickly switched off the set. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," she said, masking her curiosity about what was being said on the radio. "Some of us are gathering in the cafeteria for a prayer session. Would you guys like to join us?" The men shook their heads. "Are you sure, Jack? You're the leader. It might be nice if you said a few words." "I'm not exactly God's best representative," Forrest said with a wink. "Besides, I'll be saying plenty in the days and months to come." "Well, it's never too soon to thank you again for the offer," Ulrich said, stepping forward to put his hand on the door. "Be sure to put in a good word for us, will you?" Yeah," she said, backing out of the doorway. "Sure. Thank you." He smiled and closed the door, signaling for Kane to switch the radio back on. "But it looks like the Dakotas are gone. The sky is black and there's shit raining down on everything. The entire neighborhood is catching on fire. This is the end of the fucking world. God's wrath, man. Armageddon." "Loon," Forrest remarked, casually lighting a cigarette. "Should I go get Linus and Oscar?" Kane asked. Forrest shook his head. "You can fill them in later. I've already told them where I want them and why. Keep the dial moving. We can skip the hyperbole." Kane turned the dial. "Since it's out all over the city, I should say probably not. First CNN went off the air and then the power went out all across town. Nobody knows what's going on. And don't even bother calling 911. There's a lot of smoke outside, too. It's blowing in from the west." "That's from the flash fire," another replied. "No telling how far that will spread." "No sign here in Maine," said another. "Still a bright sunny day. We still got TV, too. The news is showing fires all over Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Canada, too. People are still rioting in New York City, and the army has pulled out. Wait, they're showing shots of the sky now. Looks like it's on fire," Where's that? Hold on. The caption says St. Louis. Oh, shit. People are running past the camera in flames. Keep that channel, Marcus. Sounds like it might be a party line. On fire? In St. Louis? It's what it says. Should I lock the door? Ulrich wondered. No, Forrest said. What do you think? I hate keeping information from the others. Feels a little like communism. Oh, now they're showing somewhere in Southern California. It's all on fire. Nope, they just lost the feed. This shit here might freak the women out, King said. I'll lock the door, Ulrich decided. We'll tell them about it if they ask. People on fire won't play well. My wife just came in from outside. She says she can see a darkness to the west. Christ, it's moving fast. We'll be going to the basement soon. Hey, I'm down here in Jacksonville. It's raining like hell here. Loudest goddamn thunderclap I've ever heard in my life. And the wind! Jesus, the wind! That's from the asteroid, you'd better bet. Hey, what about the government? Has anybody heard a damn thing? Ha! The government, remember 9/11? Katrina? They're running for the bunkers, they're out fishing. We're on our own, pal. Nobody's fishing today, ass White. But he's right. We're on our own. White Horse calling. Anyone hear me? This is White Horse calling. Go ahead there, White Horse. King looked over at Forrest. White Horse? Capital of the Yukon. Earth's quaking like hell up here, folks. A giant crack ripped right through the center of town. Power's out too, and it's getting dark. Gonna be a long winter, you betcha. The three men listened for the next hour, and the news was all the same, more or less. The continent was dying, and for the most part, people were saying their goodbyes in surprisingly calm and dignified ways. By the end of the hour, Forrest decided to meet with the rest of the population, and he shared with them much, though not all, of what they had heard. To his relief, most of the women were satisfied to hear it from him, and made no requests to hear it for themselves. Many of them suspecting things were worse than he was letting on, and choosing to remain willfully underinformed. Later that night, as everyone was milling about getting ready for bed, Andy cornered Forrest at the end of the hall near the blast tunnel door as he was re-entering the corridor. What are you keeping from us? She asked quietly. I'd like to know. Ever read Revelation? He said with a rueful grin. Book 2. Chapter 28. 3 months had passed since the asteroid strike, and the skies had long since grown dim. The average temperature in the Hawaiian Islands now hovered at 35 degrees Fahrenheit, and the ocean life had at last begun to die off. However, there were still fish in the sea to be caught, and the Navy had their hands full protecting the fishing vessels from a pirate attack. Admiral Preston Longbottom drew a careful breath before making his response, reminding himself that the people of Hawaii had elected a government, and that a military must exist to serve that government. Madam President, he said patiently, I am not disagreeing with you, but you must understand that we need to patrol the islands. There are still pirates in these waters. Esther Thorne, now the president of the United Hawaiian Islands, had reluctantly accepted the office 6 weeks earlier, and so far she was not terribly pleased with the progress they were making towards securing the future of the islands. The population of 1.2 million was doing well in terms of cooperation with their newly elected government, but there was growing unease over the dwindling food supply, and the announcement that rations were to be cut again had not been well accepted. I don't mean to be obstinate, Admiral, Esther said, but I've told you before that your men and their expertise are needed elsewhere. If the pirates attack the fishing boats, by all means blow them out of the water, but don't waste time looking for them. You'll never hunt them out of existence. We're bringing half the vessels back into port, and that's my final decision. Longbottom sat back looking pissed. The idea of taking orders from an astronomer did not ride well with him at all, but the crotchety old bitch had been elected in a landslide. At least her vice president was Barry Hadrian, former twice-elected President of the United States, and hugely popular in the islands. At first, Hadrian had not approved of the idea of canning the old state government in favor of an entirely new federal government, but saw that it was inevitable. The vast majority of people in the islands were demanding a fresh start. When he began to hear talk that the military element in the islands was considering militarizing the government, he approached Esther and offered himself as her vice presidential candidate. With his support, the other three candidates, all of them lifelong politicians, didn't have a prayer of being elected. "I think what President Thorne is trying to say, Admiral," Hadrian interjected, realizing that Longbottom was mostly trying to preserve the size of his force and thus maintain his importance, "is that we're in dire straits as far as feeding the population is concerned, and that your engineers and other servicemen will be better utilized trying to solve those much more immediate problems." Dr. Harold Shipman, here in his new capacity as advisor, smiled at Esther. Neither of them had any illusions about who at the table had actually kept the Navy in check to this point. "Yes, sir," Longbottom said, still respectful to the former commander-in-chief. "The wind farms are providing us with enough electricity to run our essential services," Esther continued. "And the natural gas is keeping us warm. But we're not moving fast enough on indoor farming, which is why we must focus our efforts, gentlemen, until we have solved the problem. We are not going out the way they did at Easter Island centuries ago by devouring one another." This had been one of Esther's campaign promises, and she never passed up the chance to restate it, understanding how real the possibility was of the food running out. By now, most shopping malls and grocery stores, most buildings with fluorescent lighting, were on the way to being converted into greenhouses. But Esther was well aware that once their fluorescent bulbs burned out, there was no immediate way of replacing them. New technology had to be developed as soon as possible, using resources available within the Hawaiian island chain. "Admiral," she said, having a sudden idea, "how difficult would it be to use the nuclear reactors aboard your aircraft carriers and submarines to power a new industrial center?" Longbottom sat forward, casting a surprised glance at Hadrian. "What sort of industrial center?" "I don't know," she said. "That's for you and your engineers to work out. I've already said many times that I don't believe for a single moment there aren't enough resources among these islands for us to sustain ourselves without the sun. But we need men of vision. There are civilian engineers here, but yours are the best and the brightest. And I'm convinced that if we're to be saved by new technologies, your engineers will be the people who develop them. We still need the Navy, Admiral, but we need them to perform an entirely different mission now." Longbottom drew another breath and sat looking at the table. "Madam President," he said at length, "I'm getting old and I'm afraid I haven't a great deal of faith in new technology." "I was reading about Golda Meir last night," Esther remarked, "for obvious reasons." Everyone chuckled, however dutifully. "And she once said something that I find applicable to our situation. She said, 'Ability hits the mark where presumption overshoots, and diffidence falls short.' Now, we all know that I don't make a pimple on Golda's backside, but I'm smart enough to know that she was right. Your men and women have an abundance of ability, Admiral, and they'll work to solve our problems. But I need you on board." Longbottom sat thinking for a long moment, realizing that fighting against the tide would serve no one's interest. "Perhaps I've grown too fatalistic about the future," he said slowly. "Perhaps there is a way, I don't know. But I'll put together a committee and—" "No committees," Esther said. "Committees are the old way of doing business, and we don't have the time. Gather your engineers and your mechanics, your avionics experts, and every other expert you've got. Gather them in the hangar of one of those floating airports you command out there and tell them I want them, what we want them to think about, and to start thinking right now, to work to save the life of the human race. And forget about bloody goddamn pirates." Hadrian sat smiling in his chair. happy to see that Esther had at last found her way with the Navy. "Does that sound like a great enough challenge for you, Admiral?" The Admiral looked at him, a slight grin coming to him. "Yes, sir, Mr. Vice President. But to be honest, I think I'd rather have to fight the Cold War all over again." "This is a Cold War," Hadrian replied. "As cold as any of us can imagine. It snowed right here in Honolulu last week." "I know," Longbottom said, looking grim. "Dirty gray snow." "It's a worthy fight," Esther said. "And we owe it to our progeny to make it." "I'll do my best, Madam President. You have my word." "That's all anyone can ask for," Esther said. "Thank you for being here today. I know that meeting with me was the last thing you felt like doing." "There's something else that Golda Meir once said, Madam President." "Let me have it," she said glumly. She said, "Being 70 is not a sin." Esther allowed herself to smile at the man for the first time since meeting him. "So then you see, Admiral, why I trust her judgment." After the meeting adjourned, Esther sat alone in her office with Hadrian. "You think I'm nuts, don't you?" "Not at all," Hadrian replied. "Why do you say that?" "Because you knew what I was trying to accomplish in there even before I did. And yet you let me twist." "You needed to find your own way with him, Esther. You gained some of his respect in there today. Had I done all your talking for you, he'd still be paying us lip service. Whereas now I think he may actually be with us." "In other words, you weren't entirely on board before this meeting either?" "This was your sink or swim moment, Esther," he said with a smile. "Every politician has one. Congratulations. You've made it to the edge." Esther shook her head. "Me, a politician? I swear if I ever see that Chittenden boy again, I'll crack him over the head with this cane." "Who's Chittenden?" "The astronomer who got me into this unholy mess," she said. "If it weren't for that boy, I'd be rocking in the bosom of my lord right now instead of having chess matches with admirals." Hadrian smiled. "It may well be that the human race will one day owe this Chittenden a great debt of gratitude." "That hope lies with the Navy," she said. "The Navy and a favorable wind." Chapter 29. The last 3 months had not been kind to Private Shannon Emery, who was now the property of a man the bikers called Brutus. He possessed her in virtually every sense that one human being could possess another. She fought savagely every time he came to take her, which was at least once a day, and he always laughed as he pinned her down and forced himself upon her. She had bitten him once on the neck early in her captivity, and he had beaten her for it, promising to bust out her teeth if she ever did it again. So Emery did not try to bite him after that, though she had vowed to bite off anything he put into her mouth. And he must have believed her because so far he had not yet attempted to do so. She spent most of her days now locked in a motel room in Mesa, Arizona, where the temperature fluctuated between 20 and 30 degrees. There was no heat in the building, so she spent most of her time sitting on the bed wrapped in blankets. She was allowed to keep her uniform and boots, and had so far been fed decent food, but the selection grew poorer over the weeks. And for the past few days now, she had been given nothing to eat but cans of creamed corn and lima beans. She knew the Mongols had recruited more biker types to their cause, and that their numbers were now close to 100. They were also taking prisoners for food, literally feeding upon the weak. In the early days, from her balcony on the 10th floor, she had watched the flammable parts of the city burn and the populace fleeing south. Few police remained behind, and those who did were quickly killed off by lawless mobs of men looking to rape and plunder away their final days on Earth. Civilized people had banded together and done rather well for the first month or so after the impact, until their food supplies gave out and they grew too weak to fight, either taking their own lives or being overrun by those willing to eat human flesh in order to survive. The males had been killed and eaten straight away, the females abducted and raped and finally eaten as well. Twice, even the biker motel had been attacked. But the Mongols were violent Viking-like warriors. They fought with everything from pistols and machine guns to axes and machetes, teaching even the local sociopaths to stay away. A few small convoys of military vehicles had passed through town headed south, and the Mongols ambushed a couple of them, taking the ammunition and food. By the end of the second month, Mesa City had grown bitter cold and become more or less a ghost town, people only emerging at night to scavenge for food. Many of these people fell victim to Mongol traps and became food themselves. The Mongols, too, had begun to forage, sending groups of well-armed men into the suburbs each day to scavenge anything of use. They went systematically through each neighborhood, moving from house to house, discovering many families who had found ways to survive. The door to the motel room opened, and Emery prepared herself to fight yet again, as Brutus stepped in and stood looking at her. He wore his long blonde hair in a golden braid, and kept his beard trimmed closer to his face than the rest of the gang. But he was every bit as grubby and smelly. He was tall and muscular, with blue, mean-looking eyes, like the archetypal Viking. "Bad news," he said. She sat looking at him, hating him intensely. Often, she had considered throwing herself off the balcony, but had so far been unable to bring herself to take that final fall. "There's nothing left but dog food," he said. "After that, you'll have to eat man meat with the rest of us." "I'll starve, thanks." "You'll fucking eat or I'll blowtorch your tits." He tossed a can of Alpo onto the bed, and she sat looking at it, thinking that the time had finally come to consider the balcony in a very serious way. It would be much easier to do if she were drunk, however. "Is there any booze left?" she asked. "I'll need something to take the fucking taste out of my mouth." He grunted and left the room. She opened the can with her can opener, and scooped half of the nasty-smelling dog food into the toilet, using the bucket of water to flush it down and getting back into the bed, sticking her spoon into the can, and setting it beside her on the blanket. She had fought as hard and as long as she could, and hated to give up. But there was nothing ahead now but more and ever greater misery. Brutus came back into the room with a pair of leg shackles in his hand, and she sprang from the bed like a frog from a hot pan, beating him easily to the sliding door, but he was on her before she could get it open, knocking her to the floor with his great hairy forearm. She scrabbled to her feet and tried for the hallway, but he caught her collar and swung her around, slamming her hard against the wall, knocking her senseless. He took hold of her ankle and dragged her across the room where he used his booted foot to smash apart the heating unit, exposing the radiator pipe. Emery came to as he was shackling her to the pipe and kicked him in the face, knocking him over backward, but it was too late. She was caught fast to the radiator. Brutus stood back and wiped the blood from the corner of his eye, looking at it on his fingers. "This is the second time you've made me bleed." "Wait till next time," she said acidly. He stood on her free leg and began to unlace her boot. Emery hammered away at him with her fists, but he ignored her as he finished stealing her boots and stepped away, tossing them into the hall. "I'll fucking kill you," she swore. "You fucking piece of shit. You fucking biker trash motherfucker. Nothing but a bunch of fucking white trash biker fucks. Eating fucking people, you fucking animals." He took the blankets from the bed and tossed them over her. "Didn't have to be like this. All you had to do was go along." "Fuck you," she said from under the blanket. "I'm a fucking soldier. You're nothing but a goddamn animal." Another Mongol came into the room, a winter parka worn over his colors. His name was Gig. "Something you might find interesting," Gig said, noticing Emery's shape beneath the blanket. "We found the green Jeep on the east side of town." "What's the plate number?" Brutus demanded. "OA5599, Gig said. "It's him. I've got some men watching the house now. All the curtains are shut, but there's tracks in the dust outside the back door. A dead body under the deck." Brutus had never gotten a good look at the man who killed his brother, but he would soon be pissing on his dead body. He looked at his watch. It was 4 o'clock. "Be dark soon. We'll hit him after it gets late." "You're all animals," Emery said, still hidden beneath the blankets. Brutus booted her in the head. Not real hard, but hard enough to hurt. "Get a house mouse in here to keep an eye on this bitch. I don't want her offing herself." Chapter 30. The basement was cold, but Marty and Susan spent most of their time cuddled together beneath lots of blankets, so it wasn't unpleasant. The only time the cold was a genuine bother was when they had come out from under the covers to go to the bathroom or to wash up. They usually kept a supply of food by the bed along with the camp stove, so they could keep warm while preparing their meals. Their time together since the asteroid strike had been good, and they had made love many, many times over the past few months. More times than Marty had in all the rest of his life. By the 6th week, Susan was pretty sure she had conceived, but she chose not to tell Marty about it. The end was drawing near, and knowing that she was pregnant with his child would only make his job more difficult when the time came. The food had begun to run low after the first couple of months, and she went to sleep each night hoping never to awaken again. But each morning she awoke to find him there in bed, wrapped tightly around her. She did love him, though not in a passionate kind of way, and their lovemaking had been a wonderful way to pass the days and nights. Each Friday night they had even been able to watch a DVD on Marty's laptop until the battery finally went completely dead. Then one disappointing morning, Susan awoke to find that Marty had left the house during the night to scavenge around the neighborhood by flashlight in search of food and supplies, and in doing so managed to scare up enough food to get them through another week. It had been difficult for her to do, but she feigned happiness. She felt terrible because she knew how badly he wanted there to be a future for them. And she knew he was perfectly willing to live with her there in that basement for the rest of their lives, if that was what it took. "You do understand," she had gently said the week before, "that there has to be an end to this, right?" "I do," he answered happily. "But will you let me fight for us?" "Of course," she said, touching his pained face in the candlelight. "So long as you'll keep your promise to me." "I will," he said, actually meaning it. For by then he had seen things on his numerous forays into the neighborhood, sights that chilled him to his core. Partially butchered corpses, heads stuck on fence posts, and entire families gathered together in bedrooms, dead of murder-suicides. Soon he would be forced to venture too far from the house at night to risk leaving her alone and undefended. The light had faded outside the glass block windows, and Marty got up to cover them so they could light a candle without the risk of the light showing outside. The nights were pitch black now, and the slightest hint of light seemed visible for miles and miles, though distance was extremely hard to judge in that kind of darkness. He slipped in beneath the blankets and wrapped himself around her, placing his hand flat on her belly where he knew that his child lived. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I'm fine." "I haven't told you about the time I went to Yosemite with my scout trip yet. Would you like to hear about it?" "Absolutely," she said, placing her fingers through his on top of her belly, and rolling to her side to face away from him, now realizing that he knew she was with the child. As she listened to him telling her of his trip to Yosemite, tears began to pour from her eyes, for she had sensed a change in him, a change in his tone of voice as he told the story, almost as if he were telling it to a little girl whom he loved very much, and she knew that he had chosen tonight. Halfway through the story, he stopped and said, "Susan, will you marry me?" She rolled over, wrapped herself around him, and whispered, "Of course I'll marry you." He squeezed her, and she squeezed him back. "I love you," she said suddenly, feeling the emotion more intensely at that moment than she had imagined possible. "You are my entire life," he told her. "All that I ever was, or could ever have been, was meant for you." That was more than she could take, and she began to weep openly, kissing him and wriggling her pajama bottoms down for one last time. They made love by candlelight, their tears mixing together as they kissed and said their vows to one another. They agreed to name the child Purity. Susan fell into a deep sleep a short time later, and he lay beside her, running his fingers through her hair, and watching her sleep peacefully in the soft yellow light of the candle. He did not know who had been watching the house all that day, but he knew with absolute certainty that they would never, ever harm his wife or desecrate her body. "I love you, Susan," he whispered, his throat tight as the tears ran down his face. "And I love Purity. I love you both more than any man has ever loved his family." He blew out the candle, and Joe's pistol went off a second later. He then got quickly out of bed and opened the cans of Coleman fuel, pouring them all over the mattress and the counterpane, knowing his way in the darkness by now as well as any blind man knew his own bedroom. He ran up the stairs and opened the last of Joe's gasoline, pouring it down the stairs. He flung more gasoline around the lower level of the house, then took a road flare from the kitchen counter, popping it alight and tossing it into the basement as he ran for the back door. The basement erupted in a blast of white flame that shot up the stairs and quickly engulfed the entire lower level of the house. Marty dove from his back porch into the dirt and scrabbled to his feet, grabbing up the carbine and slinging it over his shoulder. He was quick to get out of the light of the flames engulfing the house, running through his neighbor's backyard by the light of the fire. He ducked quickly into the second house over and made his way upstairs, where he took the light of light into the basement as he ran for the rooms. They agreed to name the child Purity. Susan fell into a deep sleep a short time later, and he lay beside her, running his fingers through her hair and watching her sleep peacefully in the soft yellow light of the candle. He did not know who had been watching the house all that day, but he knew with absolute certainty that they would never, ever harm his wife or desecrate her body. "I love you, Susan," he whispered, his throat tight as the tears ran down his face. "And I love Purity. I love you both more than any man has ever loved his family." He blew out the candle, and Joe's pistol went off a second later. He then got quickly out of bed and opened the cans of Coleman fuel, pouring them all over the mattress and the counterpane, knowing his way in the darkness by now as well as any blind man knew his own bedroom. He ran up the stairs and opened the last of Joe's gasoline, pouring it down the stairs. He flung more gasoline around the lower level of the house, then took a road flare from the kitchen counter, popping it alight and tossing it into the basement as he ran for the back door. The basement erupted in a blast of white flame that shot up the stairs and quickly engulfed the entire lower level of the house. Marty dove from his back porch into the dirt and scrabbled to his feet, grabbing up the carbine and slinging it over his shoulder. He was quick to get out of the light of the flames engulfing the house, running through his neighbor's backyard by the light of the fire. He ducked quickly into the second house over and made his way upstairs, where he took up a firing position in one of the windows, watching for those who had come to eat his family. When he saw 3 men in biker colors crossing the street with shotguns over their shoulders, he became so furious with himself for not hiding the Jeep that he nearly jammed Joe's .45 up under his own chin. Instead, he quickly unshouldered the carbine and took aim at the closest model. He squeezed the trigger and the biker jerked as though he had been stung by a wasp, grabbing at his neck and falling to the ground. The other 2 men turned and ran back across the street, but Marty was pretty good with the carbine now. He shot them down before they were able to make it to cover. Then something hit him between the shoulder blades, and as he fell over on the floor in agony, he saw a large figure standing over him with a crowbar. Brutus picked him up from the floor with one arm and held him against the wall by his throat. "Now I got you, motherfucker, and you're gonna pay for killing my brother." He slugged Marty in the stomach and threw him to the floor. "I didn't," Marty gasped. "It was him! Him!" Brutus paused before dropping his boot against the back of Marty's neck. "Him who, asshole?" "Jeep guy," he groaned. "Dead! Under my deck!" Brutus remembered that Gig had mentioned a body under Marty's deck, so he jerked him to his feet and threw him into a chair. "What Jeep guy?" "Him!" Marty choked, his gut feeling as though he'd been run over by a car. "He tried to take my house, my wife." "You're telling me you killed the fucker who owns that green Jeep?" "Jeep sure ain't mine, mister." Marty was still gasping for air, holding his belly. "It's got California plates. He was a Secret Service agent. Followed my wife back from JPL. Check his wallet if you don't believe me. He was a total psycho. Brutus stood thinking it over. If Marty's story was true, he didn't exactly owe him any favors now that he had killed his 3 men in the street, but he might be willing to let him live. For a while. Okay, motherfucker, he said, grabbing Marty's coat and hauling him to his feet. We're gonna check your story out. If that cat ain't Secret Service, you're gonna wish I'd broke your goddamn neck.
5 minutes later, Marty was on his knees in the street in front of his burning house.
His hands tied behind his back as Brutus and another biker stood examining Paulus' Secret Service ID.
Don't make no sense, Giggs said. I saw a broad with red hair at the rest stop getting out of the Jeep. She was telling the Army to shoot us.
That had to be my wife, Marty blurted, conjuring his lie off the cuff. He drove her back from Caltech. Look, I'm an astronomer. I'm the guy who took the story public. My wife worked at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The Secret Service gave her a ride home the day before the asteroid hit. A few days later, he came back and tried to take her for himself. She's actually the one who shot him, not me.
Brutus and the other bikers stood looking at each other.
This ID sort of proves he's telling the truth, Giggs said. It explains how that bastard was able to kill so many of our bros.
So where's your old lady now? Brutus demanded.
Marty started to cry, having blocked it from his conscious thought until that moment. She's down in the basement, he sobbed. Our baby. I shot her. Just kill me already. Get it over with.
Put him in the truck,
Brutus said, strangely conflicted.
I'll decide about him later.
Chapter 31. Life below ground for Forrest and his flock had settled into a pleasant, if a little boring, routine within a few weeks of the impact. The children attended school with Andy for 3 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon every day, and the mothers experimented with the food they were allotted to cook for each meal. Mealtime, especially dinner, was everyone's favorite because it was story time. They took turns telling stories about themselves or someone they knew. Sometimes the stories were funny and sometimes they were very sad. But it helped them get to know one another and to remember that they were human beings with histories and memories. And most importantly, it helped to pass the time. At other times they read, watched movies, worked puzzles or played games, and everyone took turns riding the bicycle generators. The women also helped watch the monitors when the soldier assigned to launch control wanted to put his head down for a nap, or to step out and stretch his legs. In Forrest's case, it was usually to smoke a cigarette in the cargo bay. A few of the women were even learning to knit from Maria Vasquez, a skill she had thought would be important for the children to eventually learn as well, having seen to it that a lot of yarn had made its way down into the silo. She had also begun teaching some of the other children to speak Spanish in the evenings. Late night was the favorite time for the adults. After the children had been put to bed, they almost always played cards, and each of them was allowed either a small bar of chocolate or a shot of whiskey. Almost every mother had someone she shared with, so they could all have a little of each. It wasn't much, but it was something to look forward to. Euchre and strip poker were favorite card games, but it was agreed that no one would strip past their underwear, the married women especially adamant. There were a few other rare treats held in store, like extra bottles of wine, but Forrest held these items secret in the cargo bay, where none of the civilians were permitted for security reasons, and told them they would have to wait for Thanksgiving and Christmas to find out what they were. One morning, 3 months after impact, Danzig stepped into the cafeteria, where Forrest and Veronica were working on a large jigsaw puzzle with some of the children.
"You better come have a listen to this, Jack."
"What's up?" Forrest said, getting up from the table. Veronica followed them out of the room and down the hall toward launch control.
"Picked up an odd radio signal,"
Danzig said. "In Morse code. All numbers. An encrypted code. Probably military. Maybe. But Wayne says it's a conversation." "That is odd." They stepped into launch control, where Michael and the rest of the men were standing around listening to the steady stream of electronic dots and dashes. Ulrich was sitting at the console, scribbling down the numbers as fast as they were being transmitted. "Hey, dude," Forrest whispered into Danzig's ear. "You're getting a little ripe." Danzig smelled his pits. "It's that crappy deodorant we bought. I'll switch to antiperspirant." "What do we got, Stumpy?" Forrest said, putting a hand on Ulrich's shoulder. Ulrich waved at him to shut up, trying to keep up with the telegraphers. "It's a conversation," he said during a brief pause. "Two different hands, both experts." "Different hands?" Michael asked. "All telegraphers have a different pace," Kate exclaimed. "Their own rhythm." "You mean he can tell the difference between who's tapping?" Michael said. "It all sounds exactly the same." Ulrich shushed him as the transmission began again, and a couple of minutes later the conversation stopped completely. "Looks like that's it for now," he said, sitting back and looking at the stream of numbers on the pad. "They were deciphering during all those short pauses, so they're probably using an agreed-upon text, but we don't have the software to crack a code like that." "Can I see what you wrote down?" Melissa asked from where she stood in the doorway with Laddie. "Sure, honey." Ulrich reached between the men to hand her the pad. "How did you find the signal?" Forrest asked. "They're using such a high frequency, I almost didn't. It was an accident, really." "Could they hear us if we tried talking to them?" Michael asked. "Not sure," Ulrich said. "I've got no way of knowing how far away they are. But it doesn't matter. We're not breaking radio silence." "We'll continue to monitor that frequency," Forrest said. "You never know." Later that night, Forrest was down in the electrical room preparing for his ride on one of the bicycle chargers, when Veronica came in and shut the door, standing with her back against it. "Come to take a spin?" he said. She shook her head. "Missed you at cards tonight?" "I felt like hanging out alone in the LC." "One of those nights?" "Yeah, I guess." She pushed away from the door and walked over to him, putting her hands on his chest. "I've decided what I want." "Oh? And what's Michael have to say about it?" "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters." "Why?" "You said I needed to figure out what I wanted. Now I have, and you're flipping the script on me." "Flipping the script?" "Don't dodge the question." "Much as I wish I felt otherwise, Veronica, I've got a lot of respect for the man. He's a huge part of why we've been so successful to this point. His counseling sessions have probably averted 2 or 3 nervous breakdowns already. And I can't believe how popular those stupid jigsaw puzzles are." She stood looking at him. "Jigsaw puzzles? I'm trying to give myself to you, and you're talking about jigsaw puzzles?" "I'm talking about respect, honor, No, check that. One man's integrity is another man's bullshit excuse. Loyalty. The man's earned my loyalty." "So loyalty's what's changed since 3 months ago when you jammed your tongue down my throat?" He frowned. "That's not what I'm saying." "You know, you're a real piece of work," she said, stepping back. "You promised me, Jack, remember? Remember all that bullshit about not repeating or breaking promises?" "Unfortunately, I do," he said, lowering his gaze. "And I'm sorry." "So I don't rate the same respect that Michael does? Or is it a guy thing? Bros before hoes?" He looked at her. "It sure as hell isn't that." "You're the only reason I'm even down here, Jack. And now I find out it's been one big mindfuck? Okay, stop. That's taking it too far. I've never been anything but kind to you. Until now. Until you made me feel like a complete fucking idiot." She turned around, walked out of the room, and shut the door behind her. Forrest stood looking at the door. "An absolutely impossible situation," he said in frustration, reaching for his shirt to fish out his pack of Camels. Veronica came back in just as he was about to light up. She turned to close the door and stood with her back to him, as though she were unsure if she should speak. He waited, suspecting that she was really going to let him have it this time. "Do you know what?" she asked quietly. "What?" She turned around, looking very serious. "You just got punked so fucking bad." "What the fuck are you talking about?" he said, the cigarette dangling from his lip. "Michael and I split up, you dope. You haven't heard? He wants to be with Karen. I'm the last one to hear about everything down here, and it's given me a case of the red ass. Oh, stop whining. You wanted to be in charge. She came flouncing toward him and fell into his arms. I'm yours at last, she said dramatically. Yours at last, Jack? He stood holding her with a stupid grin on his face and took the cigarette from his lips. You laid me lower than whale shit a second ago. That was cruel. I couldn't resist, she said, smiling, gazing into his eyes. I had to see how you'd react. And I'd have been disappointed if you hadn't turned me away, by the way. I'd have kept you, but I'd have been disappointed. Kept me? You've been mine since the day you set eyes on me, Jack Forrest, and don't even try to deny it. I seem to remember turning you away a minute ago, he said, his lips only inches from hers now as he stared back into her soft brown eyes. And it killed you. I could see it on your face. You're the most beautiful goddamn woman I've ever seen, he said, kissing her. I want you right now, she said, suddenly wanted. Right here. But I need to go get... I've come prepared, she said with a grin, pulling a condom from her pocket. They dropped their pants and Veronica turned around, taking hold of the handlebars on the bike. Take me now, she whispered. Hurry before I fucking scream. He entered her from behind and she reached back with both hands, pulling him against her. Oh my God, she whispered. She began pushing back and forth. After a couple of minutes, they were both breathing heavily, their rhythm growing clumsier with each stroke until Veronica gasped and climaxed, sinking toward the floor, barely able to grip the handlebars. Forrest held her up the best he could, finishing only a few seconds behind her. Groaning deeply, both of them dropping to the floor where they lay in one another's arms on the cold concrete, their pants bunched up around their ankles. Holy shit, she panted. I almost passed out. He was holding handfuls of her hair, still breathing hard into her chest. I never came so hard in my fucking life, he chuckled. It actually hurt. Fuck, that was a long time coming. Again, she said, laughing as she tried clumsily to get up. We have to do it again. Not here, he said. In the missile silo. I don't want to be interrupted. That seems to be the popular place, she said, working her pants back up over her thighs. Just don't take me to your usual spot. What usual spot? He said, standing and pulling up his pants. I haven't been with anybody but my wife in 12 years. Really? She grabbed his face and kissed him. I thought that you and Andy... She's never asked, and I didn't think it would be appropriate for me to. So how long has it been for you? More than 2 years. Almost 2.5. Oh, you poor baby, she said, hurting for him. Well, let's get you caught up. They stopped at the door and had a long, tender kiss. I'm so fucking glad you found me, she said softly. It's not fair, he said. The world's dead, and we're down here feeling like this. Isn't it what you planned? This? Hell no. I didn't think we'd survive the fucking impact. Chapter 32. The next morning, Marty awoke in his own motel room beneath a pile of musty-smelling blankets and lay staring at the ceiling. He had slept fitfully the night before, and he was feeling incredibly guilty for not having killed himself when he'd had the chance. That was an easy situation to remedy, however. The first chance he got, he would grab a gun, shoot a couple more bikers, if he could manage it safely this time, then kill himself. He couldn't get over how badly they had smelled the night before, all of them crammed into the Humvee together for the ride back into the city. He had also been able to smell what he was sure was human flesh cooking on the way up the stairwell. He got out of bed, took his winter coat from the chair and pulled on his shoes, then went to the window, seeing the same gray world as the day before, dark and dim as before a heavy rain. There were spits of dirty snow in the air, and it was only late August. He considered jumping off the balcony, but thought better of it. That was just too scary. The door flew open and he spun around, half expecting someone to attack him.
"In the hall,"
Gig told him. Marty obeyed and stood in the hall, waiting to see what the man wanted. Brutus stepped from a room a few doors down, pulling a female soldier with dark red hair and stocking feet along behind him. The soldier's hands were tied behind her back, and Marty recognized her immediately as the medic from the highway. Brutus came up to him and said,
"You can go. You killed the sorry fuck who killed my brother, and we made you kill your old lady. Makes us even."
Marty wondered how in the hell that made them even. It was obvious from the look in Emery's eyes that she recognized him, but she didn't say anything or acknowledge him in any way.
"Well, can I have my guns back? I won't make it very far without them. Gig, get him his shit when we get downstairs,"
Brutus said, towing Emery toward the stairwell.
"Then bring the truck around front, but don't make it obvious."
"Is something wrong?" Marty asked.
"There's some shit coming down,"
Brutus said, "so keep your mouth shut." They hurried him down 10 flights of stairs to the lobby, where a couple of other bikers sat around in blue parkas, each of them with a biker chick in his lap for warmth.
"Hey, Brutus man, is that the dude who killed the Jeeper?"
"Yeah," Brutus said, shoving Emery down in a chair.
"Don't get up, bitch."
"What's going on, Brutus man? Something up?"
"I'm letting this cat go,"
Brutus said.
"Gig's gonna give his ass a ride out of town."
Gig led Marty behind the counter and into an office where they kept the weapons. "What's going on?" Marty asked again, seeing a number of machine guns on the table. He slung Joe's carbine over his back and tucked his .45 into his belt.
"It's time to ditch the rest of these dudes,"
Gig said.
"It's getting too hot here."
"Oh," Marty said. "Hey, suppose I can have one of these too?" Gig thought it over for a second, then shrugged and gave him an MP5 submachine gun, showing him how to operate it.
"Ain't hard,"
he said. "No, seems easy enough," Marty said, blasting Gig across the room. He grabbed some extra magazines and dashed back into the lobby, where the other bikers were jumping up and grabbing for their weapons. He sprayed them with automatic fire and, in short order, had either killed or wounded each one, the house mice included. Emery was already running toward him. "Cut me loose!" He found a pair of scissors in a drawer behind the motel counter and cut the lace that was bound so tightly around her wrists that her hands were a deep crimson. She flexed her fingers and took the MP5. "Let's get the fuck out of here." She ran to where Brutus was crawling on his belly toward a shotgun, hit through both lungs and his spleen, and stepped on his back, taking the hunting knife from his belt. "Remember me?" she said, grabbing his golden braid and jerking his head back. "This is your last fuck." She stabbed the knife into his anus, and he let out a shriek. Then she gave the blade a twist and jerked it free, using it to scalp him before stomping on his head. She threw his scalp to the floor and whipped around in time to gun down 3 more bikers, who came scrabbling into the lobby to see what the hell was going on.
"Ammo!"
she called as they ran for the exit. Marty gave her the extra machine gun magazines, and she jammed them into the cargo pockets of her trousers. "What about your feet?" he asked, as they burst through the doors and ran down the outside wall of the motel. "I got worse shit to worry about," she said, dumping the spent magazine from the weapon and inserting a new one. "Like how the fuck I'm going to tell my kid I scalped its father?" She checked around the corner and pulled her head back. "You mean he got you?" "I'm pretty sure," Emery said. "I've been puking every morning for a week." "Why were they in such a hurry to get out of here?" "I don't know," she said. "They were spooked about something, though. I think a lot of their people are still asleep. Let's see if we can find a car with some gas." There was a loud blast, followed by a secondary explosion that took out the lobby of the motel. They spun on their heels to see an M60 tank at the end of the street, a cloud of smoke dissipating before it. "All right," Marty said. "We're saved." She looked at him. "No, hon, we're in twice the shit we were 10 seconds ago." They took off down the block and hid inside a ransacked Starbucks as troops began surging toward the motel. Emery crouched inside the door, watching the soldiers fanning out. "Is it true what he said upstairs about your girlfriend?" "Yeah," Marty said. "I was supposed to kill myself right after." but I decided to kill some of those guys first, and that Brutus guy jumped me. Don't feel bad. She'd want you to live. I don't know. Don't be stupid. You only killed her to keep her from ending up like I did. Imagine how you'd feel if they'd taken her. She wasn't tough enough to live through what I've been through. Trust me. We got married, he said proudly. Really? Who'd you find to do that? We did it ourselves. Ah, that's the sweetest thing, she said, turning to look out the window. Oh shit, get back. Those two are coming in here. She dragged him behind the counter. Stand here with your hands up. I'll stay down until I hear what they've got to say. But she grabbed his carbine and dropped into a crouch. The two soldiers came into the shop and stood looking at him with his hands in the air. Where's the woman? One of them asked, glancing around the shop. The GI with the long hair. She's my sister, Marty said. I didn't ask you who the fuck she was, the soldier said. I asked where. She's in the restroom. The first soldier went to the back of the shop and stepped into the ladies' room. Emery stood up and gave the second soldier a 6-round burst through the neck and face, missing his body armor entirely. Then emptied the rest of the magazine through the ladies' room door as the other soldier was scrambling back out. Quick, she said. Strip that one's armor and ammo, and check his boot size. Marty ran to the ladies' room, and Emery went to the window to make sure no one else had heard the shots. These clowns are Air Force troops, she said, checking the dead airman's boot size and seeing that it was 9. Boot size, Marty, on the bottom of the sole. 11. Guess 9s will have to do, she mumbled, stripping the dead airman of his boots, then his gloves, armor, combat harness, and weaponry. When she was set, she pulled on the helmet and ran to the back of the shop where Marty was still having trouble shaking the dead soldier out of his harness. You look like a monkey fucking a football, she said, shoving him aside. How do you people wear all that shit? He asked. I've never seen so many buckles and zippers on one human being. Shut up, it's not that many. Go strip that other dude's ACU. This guy's a lot bigger than you. What's an ACU? Army combat uniform. Come on, Marty, we don't have all fucking day here. She had him suited up and looking like a proper soldier 5 minutes later, with the exception of his sneakers and the bloody Mandarin collar. They slipped out the back of the coffee shop, leaving all the other weapons behind save for Joe's Springfield Armory 45. God damn, it feels good to be back in harness, she said, punching him in the shoulder. Full battle rattle. Hoo-ah, Marty? Who, what? She laughed and grabbed him around the neck with her arm as they walked north up the alley. Thanks for saving my ass back there, she said, kissing him on the cheek. You're my fucking hero. I'm tired of being a hero, he said wearily. Here, hold on a second. I'd better make sure you know how to operate your weapon system before we hit the street again. This is an M4 carbine. It shoots as smooth as that other gun you had, but it's got better range and better penetration. Just look through the scope and put that red dot on whatever you want to hit. Got it? Got it. She made sure he knew how to load the weapon, and they started off again. Let's make a pact, she added. Neither lets the other be taken alive. Hoo-ah? Who, what? What is that? It's the Army battle cry. I say hoo-ah, you say hoo-ah. Got it? Got it, yeah. You're a grunt now, she said. So let's hear it. Hoo-ah! Good. So we got a deal? Hoo-ah! He said again. Fucking A, she said, slapping him on the back. We'll probably both be dead by dark, but what the fuck. They got to the end of the alley, and Emery checked west, then east, seeing troops crossing southward 2 blocks up. She ducked back. Okay, listen. Whenever we're moving, it's your job to cover our ass. And whenever we cross a street, we do it one at a time. First I cover you, then you cover me. Got it? Hoo-wah! Don't overdo it, she said. Now, get across the street and take cover at the corner, then cover me as I come across. Marty ran across the street and tripped over the curb, falling on the sidewalk. His weapon went off and shot a hole in a shop window on the opposite corner. He got up and ducked around the corner of the building, self-consciously watching up and down the street as Emery came across. Nice job, dumbass, she said, belting him on the helmet. Keep your finger off the goddamn trigger unless you're gonna shoot. When they got to the next corner, they spotted a soldier in the second-story window of an apartment building waving them down. Emery pushed back against Marty and pulled him down into a crouch. What's he want?
He's warning us to stay put, she said. He's Army, but be ready to blow his ass out of that window. How do you know he's not Air Force? Because his camo doesn't match yours. It matches mine. She double-checked to make sure the M203 40mm grenade launcher on her carbine was ready to fire. Why don't I get the one with the grenade launcher? Because you can't even walk and chew gum at the same time. The soldier continued to signal for them to hold their position as he watched eastward down the street. A minute later, he signaled for them to cross as a pair, and Emery dragged Marty across and into the lobby of the apartment building. They went up the stairs to the second floor, where the soldier met them in the hall. In here, he said. There's bad juju up the street. Emery saw the blue arrowhead of the 36th Infantry Division on his shoulder. On her own shoulder, she wore the red and yellow patch of the Arizona National Guard, with 2 arrows crossed over a bayonet. He was a broad-shouldered man with handsome dark eyes, and his name tag identified him as Sullivan. You're a long way from home, Sullivan. Tell me about it, the trooper said. But Texas ain't where you want to be. Did you desert or get run off? Depends how you look at it. I wasn't exactly down with the shit they were doing. He took a second to check out the window. There was a lot of gunfire coming from the direction of the motel now, building to a crescendo. So did Mexico attack us or the other way around? She asked. It all went to shit too fast, Sullivan said, turning back to them. We'd just gotten into Nogales. We were trying to restore order there when somebody said the Mexicans were firing on us across the Rio Grande, but who the fuck knows? They didn't have any tanks, so it was a pretty lopsided battle. Personally, I think we picked the fight. Sullivan recognized the camouflaged pattern of Marty's uniform, but didn't recognize the unit. How about you, Miller? The Air Force doesn't issue boots anymore, or what? Marty looked down at the sneakers. Me? No, the other Miller standing over there. Emery chuckled. That's Marty. He's only just enlisted, actually. The real Miller was dishonorably discharged. Explains the blood, Sullivan said, checking briefly out the window again. Closest most of those Air Force jerks down there ever got to combat before this was dragging a can of gasoline over to an airplane. They're all Air Force? Yeah, Sullivan said. From Tinker AFB. They've been probing Mesa all week. Now they're finally attacking some biker gang a few blocks over in that motel. We just came from there, Emery said. You got any food to spare? Got a case of MREs in the closet. I swiped it from the Air Force last night.
Emery showed Marty how to use the chemical heater contained in the MRE pack to warm his food, using a little bit of water from the back of the commode. The heater was a plastic bag containing a simple combination of powder, food-grade iron, magnesium, and salt. The added water started a chemical reaction that gave off enough heat to warm the ration to more than 100 degrees.
"This doesn't taste too bad," Marty said.
"I don't know what you've been eating these past few months," she said, "but this shit's fucking fantastic. That bastard made me eat a can of Alpo last night."
"What bastard?" Sullivan asked.
"The Mongols had her," Marty said.
"Who the fuck are they?"
"Those bikers you were talking about? You were with those animals? They've been kidnapping people all over town. They're eating them." "That's a fact," Emery said.
"So, what's your plan?"
Sullivan shrugged. "Keep stealing from the Air Force as long as I can. It's all about the food now." Emery looked at Marty. "What do you want to do?" He shrugged dolefully. "I hadn't really thought past getting you to safety.
Well, I'm safe now, she said with a grin. So what's Marty want for himself?
Nothing. I'll help you two steal from the Air Force. If anything ever happens, I can stay behind and cover your retreat.
No, Marty, you're not a sacrificial lamb. You're an intelligent guy. You have to have an idea or two rolling around in your head.
Well, I would like to see the impact crater before I die.
See what? Sullivan muttered. Are you nuts? He's an astronomer, she said, rolling her eyes.
See the fucking impact crater, Sullivan said. That's the craziest thing I've heard yet.
It's a hell of a lot less crazy than people eating people, Marty said.
Which is all that you've got to look forward to, whether it's eating or being eaten. And that crater is going to make the Grand Canyon look like a crack in the sidewalk.
Sullivan looked at Emery.
Where did you find this dude? Look, I'm just talking here, Marty went on. But there isn't too much of a future in stealing from the Air Force. Why not see the greatest sight of all time?
All right, suppose we find a truck, Sullivan said. Something that can handle rough terrain. And suppose we swipe enough food from the Air Force to get us there. What are we going to do after that? Sit down and starve? Marty shook his head, saying, everybody left alive is headed south. They think it's going to be warmer down there. But it won't be enough to make a difference. You were exactly right. It's all about the food now. And the food is north.
You're crazy.
No, I'm not, Marty insisted. Everyone's dead up there. Killed by the blast wave or burned alive. But the canned food, at least a percentage of it, is still edible. Scorched and without labels, but edible. Buried in the rubble, hidden in basements. You want food? Head north.
Bullshit, Sullivan said. You just want to see the crater.
No, Emery said. He's serious.
And I've already got our transportation problem solved, Marty added. It's even on the way.
Chapter 33. Early the next morning, Vasquez glanced up from his book, movement on one of the monitors having caught his eye.
Puta madre! Where did that ugly bastard come from?
Danzig looked up from his Game and Wildlife magazine to see a burly-looking man with a thick black beard and grubby parka wandering around in the kitchen above. He had a shotgun slung over his shoulder, and he was rifling through the cupboards, tossing things about. This was the first sign of life they had seen above ground since the impact 3 months earlier.
Better get Jack in here.
Vasquez pressed the button for the PA.
Forrest to launch control. Forrest to the LC.
Danzig was busy checking the different camera feeds around the upper compound to see if there was anyone else wandering around up there.
Look at this shit.
A different man in a camouflaged coat stood on the porch, holding a shotgun on 2 women and a third man. All 3 of the captives were equally disheveled and filthy, their hands tied behind their backs. Forrest entered launch control, tailed by Ulrich and Kane. Many of the others, Veronica and Michael among them, gathered outside the door waiting to learn what had put the urgency into Oscar Vasquez's voice. In addition to being the first sign of life from above, it was also the first excitement there had been since impact. Forrest watched the burly man kicking around the kitchen without comment, waiting to see what was going to happen with the prisoners on the porch. The man in the kitchen checked the stove to find that the gas burners still worked and moved quickly out of the room. Ulrich glanced at Forrest.
That was an oversight.
I'll go and remedy that right now. He slipped out the opposite door and went to shut off the gas supply to the house. Stay with Blackbeard, Forrest said to Vasquez. Vasquez changed feeds to show that Blackbeard was now standing on the porch talking to the man in camouflage. The man in camouflage beckoned to their male captive, apparently ordering him into the house. The captive stepped back, shaking his head, and Blackbeard stepped after him. The captive then dove over the porch railing and landed on his back, rolling to his feet as Blackbeard ran down the stairs into the yard and tackled him, taking some sort of truncheon from beneath his parka and beating him with it until he stopped fighting. Then he hauled him to his feet by the hair, kicking him in the butt to get him moving toward the stairs. Forrest noticed the man on the porch covertly snatching the pack of cigarettes he'd forgotten on the windowsill months earlier.
jamming them into his pocket before Blackbeard came back up the stairs.
Some bitch took my smokes,
he muttered, stepping into the hall to brief the others on what was happening. Okay, ladies, we've got a couple of scavengers upstairs, but they're no threat to this installation. They haven't found the blast door, and even if they do, there's no possible way for them to open it.
What are they doing?
Veronica asked. Searching the house for food. Can we see? Forrest looked at her, wishing she wouldn't put him on the spot. They're pretty ragged and they've got a few prisoners. It might be a little disturbing. We're taping everything and everybody will be able to view it later if they want to. He was fine about letting Veronica in to watch, but if he showed her any favoritism, it might cause hard feelings within the group, and he didn't need that. Things were going too well, or at least as far as he knew.
Why don't you let Ronnie in to act as our representative?
Suggested Joanne, the tall black woman. She had a strong personality, and she knew the other women would probably not object to her suggestion. Besides, Veronica's relationship with Forrest was easily now the worst kept secret in the silo. Forrest agreed. Mike, it may not be a bad idea for you to watch too. They went inside, and the first thing Veronica saw on the monitor was Blackbeard using a steel baton to bash in the skull of his captive, who was now sprawled face down on the kitchen floor with his hands still tied behind his back.
Oh my God, she said,
turning away. Blackbeard then picked the dead man up and laid him across the kitchen table on his belly, cutting his hands free and slitting his coat up the back with a large Bowie knife. He wasted no time slicing into the man's lower back.
Excuse me,
Veronica said, pulling open the door and leaving the room. The moment she came out, the other women could see that she had just witnessed something ghastly.
What did you see?
Tanya wanted to know. Veronica looked at the children now gathered about, leaning to whisper into Aaron's ear.
Cannibals.
Oh, Jesus, Aaron muttered. Okay, kids, come on, let's get back to school before Andy comes looking for us. She took the kids back to class, and Veronica went on to tell the rest of the women in the hall what she had seen. Back in launch control, the men were still watching as Blackbeard stood carving out the dead man's liver, dropping it black and greasy looking onto the countertop, where he cut it into portions and set them aside. When he was finished, he retrieved the frying pan from the floor and put it on the stove, laying parts of the liver into it and turning on the gas.
He's about to get pissed,
Ulrich said. The flame burned for almost a full minute before going out. Then Blackbeard fiddled with the knobs, realizing there was no more gas in the line. He smashed the chairs into pieces and left the kitchen. Kane looked across at Forrest.
Captain, I request permission to go up there and blow this asshole's brains out.
I wish we could, Forrest said, leaving it at that. By now, the man wearing the camouflage jacket had moved the women into the living room and made them sit on the couch, where they huddled together for warmth. They looked alike, sisters perhaps, appearing to be in their early 30s, but with the grime on their faces it was hard to tell. Blackbeard spoke with his comrade, then went back into the kitchen, where he began building a fire in the sink with wood from the broken chairs.
Those two women aren't for food, you know. What are we going to do if these assholes rape them on camera?
Feel bad for them? Forrest said. We go up and kill those two assholes. We may as well kill the women too. We sure as hell can't bring them down here. God knows how sick they might be. Blackbeard got a fire going and stood holding the frying pan over the flames.
That's gotta smell like holy hell,
Danzig said, seeing the smoke rising up from the pan. They all watched as Blackbeard stood cooking up the liver, taking a piece for himself. When he was finished, he piled the pieces onto a plate and carried it into the living room, where he sat down on the couch beside the women. His comrade grabbed a handful of the meat and stood eating ravenously. Blackbeard then offered a piece to one of the women, and she took a bite. Oh, Christ, she's eating it.
What do you expect her to do? If she doesn't, that bastard will torture her. They want those women alive, dude. Let's go up there and waste these dudes, man.
Look, we all knew this kind of thing was going to happen, Forrest said peremptorily. So soldier up. What do you think about this shit, Doc?
I don't know, Michael said in amazement. Though I guess it's fascinating in a horrifying kind of way.
I wonder how long before those women end up as food.
Well, I can tell you this much, Michael said. One of those two men is likely to end up as food before either of the women.
They watched as the meal was ghoulishly devoured. Blackbeard left the room and dragged the dead man out into the backyard, butchering him much the way one would butcher a game animal, dumping the intestines and other organs in a pile. He then spent the next couple of hours cooking up the rest of the dead man's flesh on the grill, using the bag of charcoal from the back porch. As he cooked the meat, he dropped it into a black trash bag he had taken from beneath the sink. When he was finished, he came back into the house and took a container of salt from the bottom cupboard and poured all of it into the meat bag, shaking it around.
Who left that salt up there? Must have been up there when we bought the place.
Oh shit, look. Blackbeard was grabbing one of the women by her hair and dragging her from the room. That's caveman foreplay.
You're sick.
There's no use letting it get to you, man. Blackbeard took the woman upstairs into one of the bedrooms, pulled down her ski pants, and pushed her forward onto the bed with her hands still tied, her pale bottom showing. She made no attempt to escape or to resist, as he unbuckled his pants and knelt on the bed behind her. He pumped for 2 minutes, and then it was over. At least he didn't beat her.
Check out your man, Doc.
He's making his move. The camouflage man was sneaking up the stairs with his shotgun lowered. Riveted, Michael stood watching as Vasquez switched the camera feed to keep up with the man now creeping into the bedroom. Blackbeard saw him and grabbed for the shotgun lying beside him on the bed, but he wasn't fast enough. His comrade blasted him in the face at close range, and most of his head vanished from the beard up. The gore-spattered woman rolled off the edge of the bed to avoid being hit by the body as it fell over onto the mattress.
Hoo-ah!
Danzig blurted, and everyone laughed. Everyone except Michael, who was simply shocked. The camouflaged man got the woman to her feet and pulled her pants up, taking her downstairs where he pulled her pants right back down, along with those of the other woman. Then over the next half hour, he smoked Forrest cigarettes and took turns at the women on the couch, seemingly in hillbilly heaven. When he was done, he divided the man meat up between 4 different trash bags, tying them together in pairs and draping them around the women's necks. Once he had satisfied himself that his idea was superior to that of his dead associate, he put the meat bags on the floor and took a dog chain from his rucksack, chaining the women together at the neck and locking it with a combination padlock. The other end of the chain he used to bind their ankles together, locking it in the same fashion with a separate padlock.
Ain't taking any chances, is he?
Next, the man unbound their wrists, presumably to restore the circulation to their hands. He then went upstairs to take the shells from Blackbeard's shotgun, along with the Bowie knife, collapsible baton, and some other items from the dead man's pockets too small to identify. Shoving Blackbeard's body onto the floor, he stripped the blood-stained blankets from the bed and went back downstairs, where he curled up on the couch and went to sleep, leaving the women to shiver on the floor. Within 30 minutes, it was too dark to see what was happening in the house, and 10 minutes after that, it was too dark to see anything outside of the house. The time was 6 p.m.
I guess that's it for today, Forrest said, looking grim.
Come on, Captain, Kane said.
I could slip in there and cut that dude's throat so easy it wouldn't even be a trick.
No, Forrest said. And I'll show you why. Oscar, run it back to where they were feeding the women. Linus, call Weston here. When Dr. West showed up, Forrest asked him to watch the woman seated on the end of the couch. See how she's hacking her ass off? West stood, nodding.
She's sicker than a dog. That could very easily be tuberculosis, which I would expect to see up there by now. Among so much starvation and deprivation, breathing all that crap in the air. But the NBC suits would protect us from...
No, Forrest said with finality.
We soldier up and soldier on. Hoo-ah! Hoo-ah!
A bit later, Forrest found Veronica sitting with Aaron and Taylor in the cafeteria. There were some children about and a couple of other women, but everybody was growing accustomed to the close quarters. learning to block out conversations that didn't involve them in order to allow one another a sense of privacy. That sure took a while, Veronica said. Are they gone? He shook his head. One of the cannibals killed the other and took the women for himself. Now they're sleeping and it's too dark to see anything. It's total darkness up there at night now.
What if they don't leave?
It doesn't matter, he said, shrugging. They're no threat to us.
Can we still see the tape?
Aaron wanted to know. If you really want to, Aaron, but it's nothing but raw brutality from start to finish. I don't think it's anything you want in your dreams.
Believe me, Veronica said. I wish I'd never gone in there. But we're allowed to see it if we want to, right?
Aaron was making sure. Yes, the Freedom of Information Act still applies. Should I go and have Oscar cue it up for you?
No,
she said with a pleasant smile.
I was merely making sure.
Christ, I've got the ACLU up my ass, he said with a chuckle, glancing toward the counter to see that the coffee pot was empty once again. I wonder who I have to fuck in this place to get a cup of coffee.
Is that your manly way of asking for someone to make you some coffee, King Jack? Taylor asked.
No, he said affably. It's my way of finding out who I have to fuck in this place to get a cup of coffee. Taylor rolled her eyes and got up from the table.
Taylor, he can make his own goddamn coffee, Veronica said. Sit back down. No, I've indulged him all these years.
It wouldn't be fair to turn on him now. Forrest stuck his tongue out at Veronica. Keep it up, she said, less than entirely pleased that Forrest had so much sway with these two women. Ooh, he kidded. She got up and walked out of the cafeteria.
Uh-oh,
Aaron said. She'll be fine, he said with a wave. She's just upset about those maniacs upstairs. That, and I won't kiss her ass in front of everyone. Aaron shook her head.
You'll never change.
What makes me such a bad guy?
You're not a bad guy. But would it hurt for you to pretend to be a little vulnerable for her?
That's what she's pissed about? My lack of vulnerability? Me walking around down here all weepy-eyed won't exactly instill confidence. Taylor retook her seat.
Well, I don't think that's the issue, Jackie Pie. The issue is that Veronica doesn't know how completely full of shit you are when you do things like manipulate people into making your coffee.
I do, so it doesn't bother me.
But she thinks that guy's real,
and she doesn't know how to reconcile him with the one she cares for.
And, Aaron added, I don't think it helps that Michael so openly dotes on Karen now.
Women like to be doted on. You do, remember? So, does she want Mike back or what? Taylor looked at Aaron.
I think his brain is made of clay.
Aaron laughed. He's playing the dullard. Forget it, he said. How soon until that coffee's ready?
I'll give you some goddamn coffee, Taylor said. Go find that girl right now and tell her how much you need her.
He sat looking at her.
Go and tell her now.
Damn, he said, getting up. You two always think you can order me around.
I'll keep the pot warm, honey.
Forrest found Veronica sitting with Melissa, who was helping a couple of the children with their math homework. Laddie was playing ball with the kids and came over to sniff at his pants pocket, pawing at his leg. Andy had managed to establish a genuine curriculum, and she'd done it with the complete support of the other mothers, which made it a joy for her as a teacher. And giving the children homework to complete outside of class kept them from playing the video games nonstop, allowing the video games to evolve into a kind of reward system. You've done an excellent job, Forrest had said to her week servitor. I was worried it might be tough to keep them occupied once they played every video game 1,000 times.
Idle hands are the devil's workshop,
Andy had replied with a smile. Forrest stepped up behind Veronica, where she sat at the table, taking a dog treat from his pocket and giving it to Laddie. Talk to you a minute?
I'm busy.
Taylor won't give me any coffee.
I don't blame her.
Are you guys in a fight? Melissa asked, noting the tension. I think so, Forrest said. I'm not sure.
My mommy and daddy fight a lot too, one of the children said. That's why mommy had to get a court order. Forrest laughed. You gonna get a court order, V? How would I do that? You're the king. Well, that's what I'd like to talk to you about. She looked up at him over her shoulder. What's that mean? We can talk about it later, I guess. Sorry I bothered you. She watched him leave the room, then went back to helping the kids with the puzzle. Why do you do that? Melissa asked. Do what, honey? Sit there when you really want to go after him. One day you'll know. Seems like a waste of time to me. I'd just go see what he wanted. Veronica looked at her, then got up and followed after Forrest, catching him outside blast tunnel number 2. Step into my office? Sure, he said. They stepped into the tunnel and shut the door. What's on your mind? She asked. Look, I'm sorry if I come off as not needing you. I need you very much. It's just that I can't walk around down here acting like Mr. Softy. Nice guys don't instill any confidence. These people need to see me acting like nothing phases me. Nothing does faze you. Well, so what, Veronica? I've seen untold amounts of heinous shit in my life. What phases me is you. You faze me. I think about you all goddamn day. I'm so fucking grateful that Karen and Mike hit it off that I don't even know how to tell you. I can't even imagine being trapped down here without you now. But I can't walk around down here like I've got Cupid's dick stuck up my ass either. She smiled and used her thumb to squeeze the tears from her eyes. Did T&E tell you to say that? The Cupid part or the rest of it? I know the disgusting shit is all you. The first part, the sweet part, of course they told me what to say. I'm too much of a goddamn man to think up mushy shit like that. She put her arms around him and they kissed. The door at the far end opened, and Tanya stepped into the tunnel from the missile silo, hesitating when she saw them. May as well come on out, Forrest announced. You're busted. She came down the tunnel, biting her lips between her teeth. I was helping Marcus find a canned corn, she said, averting her eyes. Forrest laughed. Well, the corn's over in Silo 1. Must be why I couldn't find it, she said, slipping past them and out of the tunnel. Veronica slapped him on the shoulder. That wasn't nice. She's an adult. She doesn't have to apologize for getting shagged. And I don't have to pretend to look the other way. A few seconds later, the door opened again, and Kane stepped into the tunnel, a grin spreading across his face. Either of you see a cute little black chick pass this way? She said she was looking for the canned corn, Forrest said. Kane laughed. I told her to say we were looking for paper towels. Well, she cracked under the pressure. You two are terrible, Veronica said, still hanging against Forrest. Kane laughed and stepped out of the tunnel, shutting the door after him. So are we okay? Forrest asked. Or do I need to grovel a little bit? She let go of him and pulled her hair behind her ears. I'm sorry for walking off like I did. I've never been any good at arguing. Don't apologize. That's not a bad thing. Yes, it is, she said. I should do a better job of expressing myself when I'm upset. It's a childhood thing. He kissed her again. You're fine. Did they do anything terrible to those women upstairs? Yes, they did. And that's as much as you need to hear. Let's go get me some coffee. Do you think maybe we can go looking for that canned corn later on? I understand it might be missing. On second thought, he said, taking her hand. Why don't we go see if we can find it right now? In the morning, Forrest arrived with Laddie in launch control for a look at the monitors. And the first thing he saw was the man in the camouflage jacket laying face up on the living room floor, with a Bowie knife sticking out of his neck. What the hell happened? Like that? Ulrich asked, looking up from a popular science article on wind power. That's what we saw with first light. Those girls got loose and did his ass in. They took both shotguns and all 4 bags of meat, even the blankets. Well, good for them, Forrest said. I was worried that guy was going to move in for a while. We'd have had to do something.
Which would have been stupid, Ulrich remarked. I'm glad they're gone. How'd they get those locks open, you wonder? They probably watched and memorized the combinations by now. But how'd they work the combinations on the pitch dark? First, light must come inside the house before the monitors pick it up, Ulrich said, bringing up the bathroom feed. See the chain on the bathroom floor? They needed the mirror to work the combination at their necks. One would assume their antagonist was dead by then. One would assume, Forrest chuckled. We've got another birthday today, by the way. Maria 2's kid. She's 7. Birthdays were good days because everybody got a cake for their birthday, and it cheered everyone up, especially the child of the day who got to play video games while everyone else was in class. I'll be back, Forrest said. He took Laddie with him to the cargo bay where he kept the novelties, sorting through crates of odds and ends until he found a coloring book full of pictures of a sponge named Bob, along with a brand new 8-pack of crayons. It's not exactly a G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip, he said to the dog. But everyone's got to get something on their birthday, right? Laddie grumbled and sniffed around in the box, finding a blue racquetball and trotting off toward the door with it. Hey, it ain't your birthday, come put that back. Chapter 34. Marty and his 2 Army buddies finally made their way back to his house on foot. The Air Force was all over town now, and it took the 3 of them 2 days to get back to his house and avoid the armored vehicles. Twice during the day, they were spotted and forced to fight a running battle until they finally lost their pursuers. Now Sullivan stood looking over Joe's 4-door Jeep Rubicon in the beam of his red light, noting the bad dents left in the hood by meteorite impacts, the hole in the hardtop. This is about the most aggressive tire tread you can get on a civilian vehicle, he said. Good call, Miller. But Marty wasn't paying him much real attention. He was busy looking at the ruins of his home through the night vision device, thinking of his wife and child beneath the rubble, feeling that the weight of his despair might crush him. He wished Emery and Sullivan would take the Jeep and leave without him, so he could sit down in the midst of the ruins and blow his brains out. And had he thought for even a moment that he might actually get to be with Susan again on the other side, he would have done exactly that. But he knew better, so he turned around and walked over to Sullivan in the darkness. I'd rather you didn't call me Miller, he said quietly. I'd consider it a personal favor. It was just a joke. Anything but Miller, Marty said. I've got his blood all around my neck. Emery found a roll of duct tape in a garage across the street and used it to black out all of the brake lights and turn signals. She taped over the headlights so that only an inch-wide horizontal space was exposed across the center of each lamp. Sullivan bumped Marty on the shoulder, and Marty turned around to see him standing there with a red 1-gallon gas can in his hand. Strip that tunic a minute. Marty took it as an opportunity to practice stripping his gear, and handed over the mandarin-collared ACU jacket. Sullivan then asked him to hold the light while he poured gasoline on the collar of the jacket and scrubbed it against itself to get the blood out. He then squeezed the excess gasoline from the cloth and gave the jacket back. Better? Marty shrugged back into the jacket. At any other time in his life, the smell of gasoline on his clothing would have made him sick. But under the present circumstance, it smelled wholly appropriate. Thanks, Sully. Sullivan. Sully was my dad. Who-ah, Marty said. They were on the road a short time later, searching for the best way to refuel the Jeep. By pure dumb luck, they came across an abandoned 18-wheeled shell tanker and filled up the Jeep along with Joe's 2 remaining fuel cans. Sullivan drove and Marty rode shotgun. Emery sat in the back seat with her M203 grenade launcher. Anyone attempting to chase them down would get the shock of their lives. This guy Joe, Sullivan said, shifting into drive. He was a good friend? He was the best friend anybody could ever hope for, Marty said. Well, he sure left you a fine set of wheels. It occurred to Marty then, for the very first time, that he and Joe had a great deal in common now. It's a good Jeep, he said. They drove back into town, and Sullivan parked as close to the Air Force perimeter as he dared.
They're keeping their supplies in what they consider to be their rear on their northern perimeter. We can keep to the side streets and walk right up to their supply column like I did the other night. They've still got night vision, but they're not keeping up a very good watch.
What if we swipe one of their chargers? Marty asked. Plug it into the cigarette lighter here in the Jeep. That way we could drive without headlights, right?
Let's not get greedy, Sullivan said.
What's one look like? Marty said.
I'm wearing an Air Force uniform.
Whoa, Emery said. You can't even walk the walk, Marty, much less talk the talk. And you're wearing Adidas. Who looks at anybody's feet in the dark? Marty argued.
He's got a point, Sullivan said. And a charger would be a big advantage. Otherwise, these NVDs will be useless in a day or two.
He's got a death wish is what he's got, Emery said. No, I don't, Shannon. I really do want to see the crater.
Emery reluctantly agreed. Then they came up with a plan.
They used the night vision devices attached to their helmets to cover the last 2 blocks, easily slipping through the Air Force perimeter undetected. They grabbed 2 cases of MREs apiece from the nearest deuce and a half, each case containing 12 complete meals, and hurried back to the edge of the perimeter. There were a number of sentries posted, but they were either sleeping or busy talking, most of them in total darkness with NVDs in the up position on the front of their helmets. Apparently they were feeling invincible now, that the Mongol threat had been smashed. The trio stashed the food in a safe place and made their way back to the supply trucks, searching the cab of each for a charger. Not finding one, they were forced to penetrate deeper within the Air Force perimeter, finally taking cover behind a U-Haul truck near a well-lighted repair station, where a number of airmen stood around talking and smoking cigarettes. A large green diesel-powered generator was running at the back of the repair bay, providing heat as well as light to a row of 6 53-foot Air Force trailers parked to the right of the garage.
That's a command car over there,
Sullivan said, pointing across the lot to an armored Humvee festooned with multiple radio antennae.
If they don't have one in there,
Emery said, they don't have one.
I'll be back,
Marty said, and stepped boldly from behind the truck into the light before Emery could grab him.
He does have a goddamn death wish,
Sullivan hissed, bringing his M4 to bear, sighting on the group of 9 airmen inside the bay.
I told you,
she muttered, doing the same, her finger on the trigger of the M203. The airman glanced in Marty's direction as he strolled casually across the lot with the carbine slung over his shoulder, his hand in his pocket, waving lazily as he passed within 100 feet of the open door. The wave was returned by a couple of the airmen who went right back to their bullshitting.
Check that out, Emery said. I'm still going to jerk a half hitch in his ass, if we survive this.
Marty walked past the trailers and over to the command car, which sat out of view from the garage cloaked in shadow. He opened the far side door and got in, shutting the door and using his red light to have a look around. There was a charger on the deck between the seats, resting on top of a grenade-bearing vest containing a dozen 40mm grenades. In the back seat, he saw a medical bag, like the one Emery had worn over her shoulder the day he and Susan met her. The grenade vest was confusing at first, but Marty was getting the hang of the military's tricky contraptions, so he managed to shrug into it without much trouble. He tucked the charger away in his harness, shouldered the med kit, and got out of the Humvee. He heard a woman's muted cry and froze. A man laughed. Marty looked up at the windows of the trailers, and his skin tightened into goose flesh as he realized what the trailers were being used for. "No more," he muttered, taking Joe's .45 from its holster and stalking through the darkness to the closest trailer. He stepped onto the stairs and slowly opened the door.
"Get ready to run,"
Sullivan said, watching Marty through his NVD.
"Go ahead, split," Emery said. "I can't leave him."
"You've got a death wish too now?"
"No," she said resignedly. "But I like the guy. He saved my ass."
"Fuck all," he muttered, sighting down the barrel of his M4 and getting ready to do battle.
"Go on, Sullivan. You don't need to stay here. You can make a good run without us. There's enough food back there to last you a couple of months."
"Can't do it," he said.
You might be my only chance of ever getting laid again. She patted him on the shoulder. In that case, hon, you definitely better go. I'm playing for the other team. He took his eye from the scope just long enough to see if she was kidding. Still, he said, I got a pretty good tongue. You might get desperate. Hoo-ah, she said with a chuckle, and prepared herself to meet death standing up. Marty stepped into the trailer with a pistol concealed behind his thigh to find an Air Force sergeant sitting at a desk reading Hustler magazine. The sergeant pulled himself out of his fantasy and set the magazine aside, having a look at his clipboard and frowning as he flipped to the next sheet of paper. You're confused, Miller. You're not up until tomorrow night. No, I'm up right now, Marty said, pointing the pistol into the sergeant's face, seeing that his name was Priest. What the fuck is wrong with you? Priest said, cautious but unafraid. You got shit for brains? You can't wait 24 hours? Put that fucking thing away before I report your ass to Moriarty. How many men in the back? Marty asked. The sergeant gave him a queer look, noting the dark stain on the collar of Marty's jacket. Who the fuck are you, buddy? Priest? I'm not your buddy. So unless you'd like to die with me, you'd better answer my question. 6, Priest said, his mouth suddenly dry. 3 broads to a side. Marty took a look around, now noticing the 6 rifles in a rack on the wall behind the desk. Get the fuck out, he said, stepping aside and waving the sergeant toward the door. Priest kept his hands shoulder high as he came around the desk, and Marty belted him in the back of the head with the pistol as he passed. Now, in every movie he had ever seen where a man got whacked in the back of the head with a gun, the guy always fell down. Priest did not fall down. What Priest did was grab the back of his head and spin around, swearing aloud and forcing Marty to belt him again, only this time on the top of the skull, which knocked Priest to his knees, but he still didn't fall over. So Marty bashed him a third time much harder, and the sergeant finally fell over, but he still wasn't knocked down. He was, in fact, now sobbing like a child. This put Marty in a serious quandary, mindless brutality not really being his field of expertise. Don't hit me anymore, the sergeant whimpered. I can't see. Jesus, you blinded me. Marty was suddenly feeling so bad for the man that he nearly started crying himself. Don't fucking move, he hissed. I won't, whimpered the severely injured man. I swear. Marty went down the hall and opened the first door to find a man humping a woman in her mid-40s. She had blonde hair and was staring off into deep space. What the fuck? The naked man said, climbing off the cot from between the woman's legs. Get the fuck! Marty shot him in the throat and turned around, kicking open the door to the room directly across the hall, where another woman was being violated. He shot the man in his stomach and turned to face down the hall, shooting each of the 3 men to emerge from their rooms. The 6th man had obviously chosen to hide. So Marty walked over the bodies and opened the door to find him cowering on the bed with his hands over his head. He was a young airman, no older than 19. The woman he had been molesting, even younger than her tormentor, was obviously in a deep fog like the others. Marty shot him in the head, nearly jumping out of his skin a second later to the sound of a thunderous explosion outside the trailer. Kill me, the girl begged. Please. Marty stepped forward, kissing his fingers and touching them to her forehead. Close your eyes, he said gently. Hearing the sounds of men clambering out of the next trailer, followed by those of automatic rifle fire. The girl closed her eyes, and he did the same as he held the barrel of the .45 near her temple and pulled the trigger. The slide locked back on the weapon as the last shell was ejected, and he turned from the room without looking at her, ejecting the spent magazine and slapping in a new one. He did not look into the other rooms he passed, holstering the pistol and unslinging his carbine as he made for the door, stepping over the sergeant's now lifeless body where he still lay on the floor in front of the desk. What the fuck's he doing in there? Sullivan said, as they stood waiting to find out what would happen. 90 seconds later, 3 half-naked men came piling out of the adjacent trailer with rifles in hand. Apparently none of the airmen in the garage had been able to hear Marty's shots over the generator, but the men next door had. The jig's up, Emery said. I got the garage.
Sullivan shot down the men coming from the trailer as Emery fired a grenade into the bay, hitting the generator and blowing the men in the garage to Kingdom Come. He shot more half-naked men as they came scrambling from the trailers, and he nearly shot Marty too, as he came running across the lot with ever more men showing up out of the darkness. "The fuel truck!" Sullivan shouted, banging Emery on the helmet and pointing far to the right of the trailers. "Burn it down!" She fired a grenade and blew up the fuel truck, roasting a number of airmen as they were running past it. Marty made it back unscathed, and the three of them slipped away into the night, grabbing up the stashed MREs along the way. "You stupid fuck," Sullivan said later, tossing the cases of MREs onto the ground near the Jeep. "What the fuck was that about, huh?" "I couldn't find a charger in the command car," Marty lied. "So I decided to check the trailer." He pulled the charger from inside his vest. "I got this med kit and some more grenades for Shannon's pop gun, too." "Never again," Sullivan said, jamming his finger into Marty's face. "Never again, and I want your goddamn word. You don't have the right to play games with my life." "You're right," Marty said, chastened. "It won't happen again. You've got my word." They put half the MREs inside the Jeep and lashed the other half to the roof with the fuel cans. At first light, they decided to stop for some rest and park the Jeep off the road beneath an overpass in the desert. Emery volunteered to keep first watch because she was too wired to sleep, and soon Sullivan was snoring away behind the wheel with the seat back. Marty sat with Emery on the hood of the Jeep for warmth. "You should try and get some sleep," she said. "I'm too wound up. I'm getting to know you. You lied earlier. Why'd you really go into that trailer?" "I heard someone hurting a woman," he said. "Are all military men fucking psycho?" "No," she said. "And not all those guys back there are psycho either. But if the good-natured guys are outnumbered, what are they going to do? They have to eat. They could take off like Sullivan did. And I'm sure plenty of them have, Marty. You're talking about a lot of young guys with guns and no worthwhile leadership. It starts at the top. That's what's wrong with our unit. We had a wife-beater for a CO. "Think we can trust Sullivan?" Marty asked. "He made a cute pass at me back there before your little show. I'm pretty sure he's a gentleman. Does he have a chance with you?" "I don't know," she said with a shrug. "Like he said, I might get desperate." "Can you do that? I mean, you know." She put her arm around his shoulder, pulling him closer. "It's like this, Marty. There's two kinds of lesbians. Those who like it, of course, and those who don't really care for it." "Which are you?" "Well, I used to like it once in a while with the right guy. Now, I don't know. It'll take time. Plus, you might be..." "Oh, thanks for reminding me," she said, letting go of him. "I'd actually managed to forget about that. With any luck, I'll have a goddamn miscarriage. And if we make it the whole 9 months? Well, you're going to have to deliver the goddamn thing." "Me? I don't know shit about birthing babies. There's plenty of time for me to teach you all you need to know. Now do me a favor and don't bring it up again." They sat quietly for a while. Then Emery slipped down from the hood and stood looking out across the dim morning expanse of Arizona. "Marty, I don't know what I'll do if it looks like him. I might kill it." 9 months is a long time to grow attached, Shannon. Let's wait and see how you feel by then. What about you? Do you have any kids out there anywhere?" He smiled sadly and shook his head. An hour later, Marty was dozing in the passenger seat of the Jeep when something woke him up. It was the sound of a rotary-winged aircraft, the first aircraft he'd heard in the sky since the impact. Sullivan was still snoring, but Emery was nowhere to be seen. He walked out from beneath the bridge to see her come sliding down the embankment. "Fuck me!" she shouted. "Gunship coming in along the highway, flying snake and nape." "Snake and what?" "Nape of the earth, Marty, get out of sight." They listened to the helicopter come thundering overhead, and on up the highway to the north. "They're taking a serious risk," Marty said. "There's still too much particulate matter in the air. They'll burn the turbines up." "Must be why they're flying so low," she said. "That and they gotta be looking for us." Sullivan had awoken to the sound of the rotors and joined them, watching after the helicopter.
Blackhawk, loaded with rockets. They're definitely pissed.
He turned around and pointed at Marty.
This is on you, cowboy. I'm sorry. Well, forget it. We just gotta deal with it.
An hour later, the helicopter came back. By now, its engines were smoking from sucking in so much dirt and ash. But it swung wide of the highway by 100 yards for a look beneath the bridge, where Marty had gotten out of the Jeep and stood hidden behind a column. The door gunner immediately opened fire on the vehicle. Sullivan stomped the accelerator and tore off in the direction of the helicopter.
Don't miss, Shannon, or we're fucking dead, he shouted.
They had removed the hardtop, and Emery was standing in the back seat braced against the roll bar. She opened fire on the door gunner, even as the machine gun bullets were hitting the fender of the Jeep. The gunner fell back into the aircraft, and the helicopter swung around to face them directly. Sullivan swerved right against the direction of its turn, hoping to throw off the pilot's aim. The first rocket struck the ground to their left and just behind them, leaving their fate in Emery's hands. Sullivan straightened the Jeep and she fired the M203. Even as the projectile was arcing toward the windscreen of the aircraft, Sullivan was swerving hard to port. The pilot overcorrected, and the second rocket struck the ground to their right. A fragment hit Emery in the hip, and she fell down in the back of the Jeep as her 40mm grenade detonated against the windscreen of the Blackhawk, killing both pilots. The aircraft went into a violent spin, whirling around 4 times before smashing into the desert floor, breaking apart on impact and bursting into flames. Sullivan raced back toward the bridge where Marty stood waiting and locked up the brakes. The three of them raced to reattach the hardtop and quickly tied down the supplies, only to find the front left tire had gone flat. They changed it as quickly as they could, then Sullivan drove back up the embankment onto the highway. Marty noticed Emery's leg for the first time.
You're bleeding. It's shrapnel. Come back here and help me.
He climbed into the back with her, and she gave him a curved hemostat she had taken from the medical bag, which was basically a pair of locking forceps normally used for clamping off a bleeding artery or vein.
Use that to pull the shrapnel out, she said,
shrugging her trousers down over her rump to expose her bleeding right hip. He took hold of the jagged piece of metal and tugged at it, causing Emery to wince.
It's in there pretty tight, he said. Don't play with it, Marty. Pull it out.
He clamped the hemostat onto the metal and gave it a jerk. But it held fast, and Emery grabbed the roll bar, shouting in pain.
Fuck! I'm sorry. It's really in there, Shannon.
Need some help? Sullivan asked.
You just want to play with my butt. Keep driving.
It was getting too dark to see inside the Jeep, so Marty took the red filter from his light and held it in his teeth while he examined the wound.
You're going to have to do a cut down,
Emery said, digging in the bag for a scalpel.
A what?
You're gonna cut it out.
Oh, jeez.
He gripped the light in his teeth and pressed against the wound with the thumb and forefinger of his left hand, holding the skin taut as he drew the razor-sharp blade along the ridge, drawing blood and exposing the blackish metal.
Okay, good job, hon. Now pull that fucker out of me.
Marty took hold of the metal with the hemostat and had it out with one tug. The piece of shrapnel was half the size of a trading card, cut corner to corner, slightly bent. He tossed it on the floor, and Emery poured peroxide over the open wound. Then she took a packet of sutures from the bag and clamped the curved needle between a smaller pair of hemostats.
Sew me up.
He sat looking at her.
It doesn't have to be pretty, just keep it as straight as you can.
Marty was sweating.
Can you turn the heat off, Sullivan?
It's not on.
Come on, Emery said. It's not that tough.
It took him nearly 20 minutes, but Marty got the wound sewn closed, and then Emery dressed it and pulled her trousers back up. By then, it was total darkness once again, and Sullivan was driving with his night vision.
Is there enough ambient light for those things to work out here?
Marty asked, as he climbed into the passenger seat.
Not real well, Sullivan said. I've switched to infrared.
It was a bizarre feeling racing into total blackness, and Marty found it difficult to look out the windshield without feeling terrified they were going to hit something.
You're sure you can see?
I can see. He plugged one of the other NVDs into the charger, then closed his eyes and leaned his head back. A second later, Emery was tugging at his arm.
Come back here, she said. Something wrong? He asked, moving into the back again. She lay over on the seat and put her head into his lap, taking his hand and setting it on her head. Pet me. I don't feel good. Marty began to run his fingertips through her hair. Somebody talk to me back there, Sullivan said. Keep me awake. Marty lifted his head again and drew a deeply disappointed breath, smiling blandly in the dark. He really needed to sleep, but he was apparently in too great a demand. Chapter 35. Rats? Esther said in disbelief. I ask your engineers for new technological ideas and they come up with rats? Good Lord. It's only a stopgap, Madam President, Admiral Longbottom tried to assure her. And the little bastards will eat damn near anything, so breeding them won't be difficult. I can't take rat meat to the people, Esther said. By God, Barry, tell the man. Well, I think it may well be a matter of presentation, replied Vice President Hadrian, with the same calm demeanor that had served him so well as president. If you present them today with some wounded black wharf rat as the answer to our future, they'll throw bricks at you, and understandably so. But if you wait until the food has begun to run low and everyone is afraid, and then present them with an entire cash crop of clean white lab rats with pink eyes, you're a hero. Exactly right, said Longbottom, grateful for Hadrian's presence in the islands. Nothing says we have to take the project public, but we are talking about avoiding starvation. And if we start a breeding program now with the lab rats we still have here on the island, we can have a good head start by the time the fish supply begins to run out. Okay, Esther said. So where do you propose we raise these things? Well, we can raise them on the hangar decks of our carriers, Longbottom said, abhorring the idea but feeling the need to offer the concession. That will keep the population off the island and out of sight. And there are ways the meat could be processed so that eating it won't be such a distasteful idea. It's as bad an idea as Soylent Green, Esther muttered. Anyway, I don't like the idea of using your ships. I'm sure another place can be found. One of the other islands may be perfect. What else do you have for us? I saved the best news for last, Longbottom said with a smile. Thank God, Esther said. First, my engineers are confident that we can use the reactors aboard our nuclear vessels to supply electrical power to most of Honolulu for 12 hours a day, the Admiral began. On a revolving schedule. It will take time to construct a new power grid, but this is a work-ready project. And we won't have to worry about replacing the atomic fuel for a couple of years. And by then we should be running largely on tidal power. Tidal power? That requires industry, which the Australians have agreed to help us with, the Admiral said. They have been developing the technology for a number of years now. What are they asking for in return? Our friendship, the Admiral said. Our future help with any problems they may have. Exchange of engineers and ideas. All of the above. Like you, they view this crisis as an opportunity to get it right. But you still don't see it that way, Admiral. Longbottom sat back. I've done as you asked, and I will continue to do my best, but no. I don't agree entirely with the steps we are taking. I think we should be concentrating our efforts on the remaining oil platforms out to sea. The longer we wait, the more they deteriorate out there in the salty air. Oil is the past, Esther said. There's no future in it. We want the sky to clear, not to continue polluting it. I've promised the people a different way forward. It looks like you're making an effort, Admiral, and I thank you for that. We still need fuel for our vessels, Longbottom said. And I'm not sure how much oil the Australians can afford to share. Esther could sense that Longbottom was expecting a quid pro quo in exchange for his efforts, so she gave it to him, as she and Hadrian had previously agreed she would. Very well, she said. Reopen the closest platform. Excellent, he said. I believe this to be a very wise choice. How soon do you expect to see the first tidal turbines installed? Adrian asked, making sure the Admiral knew that he would be expected to carry through. Within 12 months, Longbottom replied. There's a lot of work to be done. And the new power grid will be constructed in such a manner that we will be able to hook the tidal generators right into it, Esther said. Well, that will be more difficult, the Admiral said. It would be better to wait until... That wasn't a question, Admiral, nor was it a request. That was a statement. The new power grid is not going to be a jerry-rig. I want it purpose-built for future use with the tidal generators. And whatever adaptations your people come up with will be to accommodate the nuclear reactors, not the other way around. From now, we build with the future in mind. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am, Longbottom said, pissed because now his engineers would have to go back to the drawing board. And I would appreciate it if you would send daily reports to my office, Adrian added. Daily, sir? Yes, daily. Well, sir, you do realize that we may go for weeks at a time without any real changes in daily reports, Adrian repeated. And there had better be some kind of progress made on every one of them. Then, offering the Admiral some wiggle room, he added, even if it's only the sketch of a new idea one of your engineers has put forward. Yes, sir. Now, I understand you also have security concerns, Esther said, continuing their combined assault. Yes, well, on the issue of security, Madam President, we have located a site where a number of the pirates seem to be congregating on one of the lesser islands. I would like to know what, if anything, you'd like for me to do about this threat. Esther had heard these reports already, and though she knew the piracy problem was growing, she pretended not to be concerned. What would you suggest, Admiral? Cleaning them out, ma'am. Then do whatever you deem necessary, so long as it doesn't impede the Navy's progress elsewhere. Yes, ma'am, Longbottom said, finally feeling some sense of accomplishment. Your list of responsibilities seems to be growing, doesn't it, Admiral? It does indeed, Longbottom said. And to think you are worried about losing your importance, Esther said with a chuckle. Will there be anything else? Not right now, Madam President, no. I thank you again for your diligence, he said. And please pass my thanks down the chain of command. Yes, ma'am. When the Admiral was gone, Esther rose and went to the window, where she stood leaning on her cane. Barry, how would you feel about being president again? Of the islands this time? Excuse me? Adrian said. I'm tired, she said, turning from the window. And I wasn't kidding about me not making a pimple on Golda Meir's backside. I'm an astronomer, Barry. A novelty act. I wasn't born to lead a society into the new era. The Islanders love you, Esther. You're gruff and tough, and that's what they need in a leader right now. But what if I die? She said. It's better that you're already in office by then. Andrew Johnson had a lot of trouble after Lincoln's death. I think it would be better for me to claim ill health and to step aside soon. We'll tell the Islanders that I'm staying on as one of your advisors. And they'll make regular appearances if they really feel they can't live without me. But I worry I may cause more trouble in the long run by remaining in office. The people elected you, Esther, and you agreed to take the job for 6 years. They believe in you. And if you're really that worried about dying in office, I promise right now to do my best to make sure all of your visions come to fruition. That's the problem, Barry. This was never my vision. It's the vision of some poor, dead, idealistic astronomer. Don't abandon these people now, Esther. There's nothing that says a lawyer makes any better leader than an astronomer. And you're learning. He didn't show it, but giving the Admiral permission to shell that pirate stronghold out of existence bought you a lot of capital with the Navy. Nothing makes a military man happier than getting to take military action. He laughed. He's probably getting ready to sortie the entire fleet as we speak. Esther nodded grimly. He may be at that.
But after he takes this pirate stronghold down, Adrian cautioned, pretend to lose interest in the pirates we have left. It's too soon to tell, but we may need an enemy to help keep us unified. So we should allow these pirates time to recover a little bit before sending the Admiral back out. It's a fine balance you need to strike, Esther.
See,
She said, pointing at him with the tip of her cane. That's the type of political evil that would never occur to me. Adrian grinned. That's what you've got me for, Esther. Chapter 36. The biggest trouble for Marty and his friends during their trip had been traveling along I-25 north of the Arizona border. It was jammed with deserted bumper-to-bumper ash-coated traffic, all of it pointing south on both sides of the highway. Even in the Jeep, they'd had trouble negotiating their way through the logjam of cars and over thousands of ash-coated frozen bodies along the road. What killed them all? Emery wondered. Pressure wave, Marty said. Those who weren't killed outright likely suffocated in the vacuum. By the time they reached the outskirts of Denver, the cars were nothing but burnt frames, and the bodies no more than grizzled skeletons. This is where the firestorm first began to lose its intensity, Marty said. Everything north of here is likely burnt to a crisp. They drove into downtown Denver and got out, and stood looking at the scorched remains of the once fair city. It used to be such a clean town, Emery said. Now it's an ashtray. Smells like one too, Sullivan said, hawking up a mouthful of phlegm and spitting it onto the street. They drove into the suburbs, where it turned out that Marty had been largely correct about being able to forage canned food. They saw living people here and there, darting in and out of houses in ones and twos with sacks over their shoulders. All of them ragged and filthy looking, wretches for the most part. No one came near the trio, however, and there seemed to be very little sense of danger. Still, they kept their eyes peeled. Some of the houses had mysteriously escaped the flames entirely, while others were completely incinerated. They stood talking in the drive of a brick home that had gone largely undamaged, their mouths covered with green triangular bandages against the ash blowing in the breeze. Traveling is going to get more difficult from here, Marty said. We'll still find food, but before long the highway's likely to be covered with ejecta. Won't be any gas north of here, Sullivan said.